Hello. Hope everyone is doing good. Hope everyone is doing good. Let me send out the link to a few people who wanted to watch. All right. There. Hold on. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you are all doing well. I am doing okay. Let's go ahead and end the poll now that we've started. Cool. So Shogun of Crime is leading with 42% of the votes. Tempest Blade with 28, and Monster Club and Taylor Tomiki tied with 14% each. That is interesting. I was not expecting that outcome. Alrighty. Well. Excellent. So tonight, well, first of all, welcome all of you to the Ravens Roost, where we just read stories. We don't play games. We don't get political. We don't talk about any of that stuff. We're just here to have fun, read some stories, and maybe chat a little. Got 4 stories we're reading tonight. As usual, Lark is not here. And we are picking up where we left off in the 4 stories: The Tempest Blade, The Tale of Tomiki, Monster Club, and Shogun of Crime. We'll be starting with The Tempest Blade tonight. Very excited. We left off on Tempest Blade Chapter 13. I think we only have 4 more chapters in The Tempest Blade before we're all caught up. I have not written any more of the Tempest Blade past that because, well, not because I didn't enjoy it, but a lot of people didn't show a lot of interest in it when I was writing it. So, as many of you know, I write what my audience shows interest in. And y'all might think that's kind of cheap of me, but you've got to understand, every story I write, I have a reason for writing it. I enjoyed it coming up with the idea or creating it. But I can't dedicate all my time and energy to every story I want to come up with, so I let my audience decide what they like the most because I want to please you guys. I want to please my audience, so that's pretty much why. So let us go ahead and get started with Tempest Blade Chapter 13, and we'll go from there. Tempest Blade Chapter 13, published July 16th, 2019. Here we go. Junaril was the capital city of the Tigerian Empire. For centuries it had stood against fires, disasters, and wars. The Tigerian family was strong, wise, and prestigious, bringing the city and the empire itself to a place of success once thought impossible. Even despite the war with the Lithari, there was no question that Junaril had not lost any of its majesty or beauty. Astride his horse, I was escorted through the great gates of the city by the procession of imperial guards and the emissary himself. None spoke to me, though a few looked in my direction. Retelling the story of how I was labeled an imperial traitor had shaken a few of the guards. Some who had seen me as nothing more than a mindless murderer and traitor now looked on me with something resembling respect or reverence. It wasn't what I was looking for, but it was a refreshing change. The emissary did not share in this, though, and simply rode ahead of us. The palace was the largest building in Junaril, and could easily be seen from the hills beyond the city. However, as we got closer to it, it seemed to tower even higher. It had been so long since I'd stepped inside of it. The last time, well, I didn't care to remember that day. That had been the day the brand of traitor had been given to me. I took the time to look around at the busy and bustling streets and smiled. The life of an average citizen in Junaril was busy and always mobile. Men and women moved here and there, the air buzzing with conversation and shouting as vendors tried to make deals and advertise their wares. Children often ran in front of the horses as they played. At one point, one ran out, spooking the emissary's horse and making the emissary scream at the boy. The child looked ashamed of himself as we walked past, but I stifled a chuckle when I looked back and saw him stick out his tongue at the emissary. "You find something funny?" the emissary growled. "Nothing, sir," I answered politely. "I just find children fascinating." "Have any of your own, Hawk?" the guard asked. "It's complicated," I answered honestly. I didn't want to mention Anya to them. That would cause no end to my problems, and it would certainly make me look far worse to the people of Junaril. Unlike many of the outlying territories of the Empire, which reside close to Lithari territory, there are no gray areas to the people of Junaril. There are the Lithari and their supporters, and then there are the Empire and her supporters. There is no in between. The only reason a riot hadn't amassed to throw fruit at me was because the life of Junaril is far too busy to be concerned with such trivial things. In fact, I'd be willing to bet most of Junaril had no idea I was here. "It goes without saying," the emissary shouted to me, "but when in the presence of the Emperor, you are to show him the utmost respect. You will not speak unless spoken to, and you will bow to him dutifully when you are announced. Even if you are a traitor, the only reason you still draw breath is because of the Emperor's mercy. Don't you forget it." "I haven't forgotten, especially when people like you continue to remind me of my status," I answered coldly. He ignored my jibe and led me through the city streets until, at long last, we reached the gate to the palace. Out front were imperial guards who stood watch. Once the horses made it to the gate, I climbed off and walked to it. The emissary adjusted his clothes professionally and coughed. "I have brought the Tempest, Ethan Hawke, as requested of the Emperor. Allow us admittance." The guards nodded and stood aside to open the gate. "This is where we leave you, Ethan Hawke," one of the guards who escorted me explained. "For what it's worth. Good luck." I nodded back at them all and then walked inside the castle gates of the palace of the Emperor. I never liked the palace. Though I'd only been in it once, I didn't like it at all. It was beautiful, obviously. Portraits of past emperors and empresses lined the walls. Rugs of the finest make light out upon the floor, and the high marble pillars imposed down on all who passed it. The path towards the throne room was like a great hallway of glamour and extravagance. I think the reason I didn't like it was I wasn't used to such austerity. I preferred simple things. A simple house or cabin was enough for me. I didn't need such splendor, and being surrounded by it made me feel small and lesser. "Hawk!" I froze in place and looked to see a man standing to the left of the throne room doors. He was tall and wearing heavy plate armor. In his hand was a long halberd poleaxe, and his face was dark with blue eyes. His black skin set him apart from most of the land, but so did his height, standing almost 4 heads taller than most. He was a massive brute of a fellow, but I smiled when I saw him. Roran! I laughed. I walked around the emissary, much to his chagrin, and took Roran's metal-clad gauntlet in my hand to shake it. Roran, like me, was once one of the Silver Corps. Nicknamed the Axe, he had been an invaluable asset during several sieges on Lothari outposts. However, a fire arrow had punctured his neck, and he was forced to retire from the Corps.
How long has it been, you old fox? Roran laughed. I never thought I'd see you again.
Neither did I. What are you doing here? I asked.
I was hired on as a guard to the Emperor. I keep the peace in the city, and I'm captain of the guard as well.
He winked, looking rather pleased with himself. I just laughed. I always knew you were destined for greatness, Roran. I didn't expect it to be to the Emperor.
Roran! The emissary snarled. Cease this frivolity with traitors at once. Your orders are to...
Hold your tongue!
Roran bellowed, causing the emissary to back down.
My orders are only to be given by the Emperor himself. You do not command me, you grocery boy. And mind how you address my friend Hawk here, or I might forget my loyalties.
The emissary backed up fast, and then in a huff strode away. I looked back at Roran with a grin. How very noble of you. Are you my knight in shining armor?
You're certainly no fair maiden,
Roran chuckled. His smile then turned to a frown of disappointment.
Though, I fear you might need rescuing this time, my friend. I can't help you in there, and I don't know why the Emperor has called for you. If he's chosen to execute you, or finally punish you for your actions in Narel...
I will accept my punishment.
But you're an innocent man,
Roran snapped, and we both are servants of the Empire. If the Empire wishes me dead, where can I run to? Roran grumbled and looked away. He then turned to the doors into the throne room and placed a hand on them to push them open, but paused briefly before doing so.
Whatever happens in there, know that you are and always have been a good man, Ethan.
I smiled and walked towards him. I leaned close and took the risk. I dared not take with any other. If I am put to death, I must ask a favor of you, Roran.
Name it.
The daughter of Elijah Eridan. I found her. Roran's reaction was quite similar to Gaius. His eyes widened in disbelief and he rounded on me fast.
You what?
She's staying with me on Gaius's end. I've adopted her as my own. If I do not return to her, I will not ask you to care for her in my stead, but please, protect Gaius and his family.
Ethan, do you realize how reckless that is?
Yes.
Damn it all, I'll do what I can, Roran muttered. But not for the Lothari. For a brother-in-arms.
Thank you, Roran. Roran then pushed open the doors of the massive throne room.
Your Majesty, he called. The Tempest Blade, Ethan Hawke, has come.
I walked into the throne room, sword on my hip. Somehow it seemed to reverberate as I walked, like it was prepared to slaughter. Officials and politicians all stood around and gasped, staring at me, whispering about the horrible Lothari-loving traitor. The Emperor, Gregor Tiger III, sat upon his throne, his daughter by his side. She was close to my age and stunningly beautiful. Upon seeing me, she took her father's arm fearfully, but her father only narrowed his eyes at my approach. I glared back at him and then dropped to one knee. Your Imperial Highness, I bowed. What do you ask of me? The Emperor looked around the room and held up his hand. All but the traitor, leave my sight at once. The room buzzed with shock, but none dared disobey the Emperor as they all left. The room in a wave of whispers and sneers. The two guards stepped forward to take my sword, but the Emperor waved them off. Leave him. He will not harm me. But sire, he is a housebroken dog. He will not spill my blood. Will you, boy? He asked. I wouldn't dream of it, I growled back. As I said, leave us, the Emperor snapped. The guards bowed and marched out of the room once more. The deafening silence of solitude was incredible. I glanced up at the Emperor and his daughter. My child, leave me as well. I don't want you here to bear witness to such unpleasantness.
Father, I insist I remain. I wish to look into the eyes of the hawk, the traitor.
I glared up at her. My golden eyes meeting her green emerald ones. She looked away fast, taken aback by my glare. Her father glanced in her direction a moment and then stood up. Gregor was a tall man of about 6 feet in height. He had long, dark hair and a scar under his chin where a beard had grown to cover it. He was a built fellow, though it was hard to tell under his regal attire and fur cloak. A crown of gold and rubies sat on his head, and his jaw tightened when he spoke. I must insist as well. Please, leave me. His daughter started to object, but finally scampered out of the room to leave her father and I alone. Once the door to the hall had closed behind her, Gregor Tiger III dropped down in his throne and exhaled long and heavily. "A long day, your highness," I asked. "You don't know the half of it, my boy," he grumbled. "Rise, Ethan. Let us speak freely now." I stood once more and bowed my head to the Emperor. "I suppose it's good to see you again would be in poor taste." "How about you look well?" I offered. "But you don't. And neither do I imagine," the Emperor grumbled. As he spoke, his tone softened and his bitter voice grew velvet. "Forgive my display earlier. It is not what I wish to offer." "I didn't buy it for a moment," I answered. And it was true. The Emperor had never seen me as a traitor. After receiving the reports of what had transpired at Narel, he wanted to fully pardon me. But the Empire was still at war at the time and reeling from the loss of 3 Silver Corps soldiers. He couldn't pardon me without turning the public against him, and the last thing he needed then was a division. He had faked a trial and decreed that it would be more fitting to let me suffer in life than receive a swift and merciful death. However, it was also he could keep me alive. To the public, he hated my guts, but between us, it was one of the most staunch allies I could ask for. "I'm sorry to say that we have little time to catch up, Ethan. There's much I wish to discuss with you, but it will have to wait for a day where we can speak more comfortably," he muttered. "Though I must ask, how is Gaius doing?" Gaius once worked directly under the imperial family as a court physician when he was a young man. "The old coot growls most of the day and sleeps the rest of it. But his cooking is still spectacular," I smirked. "I miss that cranky badger," Emperor Gregor mumbled. "Do tell him hello for me, won't you?" "I will. But sire, what is it you wanted from me?" Gregor frowned and folded his hands over his lap before letting out a long and heavy breath. "You know that I have 5 children, 3 daughters and 2 sons. The time is coming when I will have to step down as emperor and begin teaching one of my sons how to lead. Under the law, I must choose which son inherits the throne." "Are none of your daughters eligible?" I asked. "I offered it to Helen, since she's the eldest, but she didn't want the job. She prefers traveling abroad and studying the world. Her other sisters, Tatiana and Ophelia, are wise and beautiful, but Tatiana might be a fine choice for empress as well, but she's far too naive. Too childish, too fascinated with shiny things and new people and places. She's just not ready for the practicality that comes with it. And Ophelia has been so detached from government affairs that I don't trust her to put the government's best interests at heart. Perhaps if Tatiana grew more mature, she'd be a fitting empress, but I digress." "Perhaps, but what does this have to do with me?" "Ah, yes. Forgive an old father for blabbering about his children," he laughed. "If you have a child, I'm sure you'll understand someday." Again, I didn't dare mention Anya. If he knew, what would he say? "Of course. But my sons, Saul and Gregory, are currently in competition to determine who is most fit to be the next emperor. Both are attempting to win favor from me through outlandish and bold deeds." "Will they make any difference?" I asked. "Likely not. An emperor's mettle is not determined by the boldness of his actions, but by the wisdom in his leadership. Neither of them show much of that. It pains me to speak ill of my sons, but I fear neither of them are very good candidates." "Are you asking me for my opinion on them?" I asked. "No. In fact, it's not I who asked you here at all," the Emperor answered. "My younger son, Gregory, has asked for you." "Then where is he?" "Already on his way to his daring deed, I fear," the Emperor answered. "Are you familiar with the fort of Terranam?" "Yes, it was a prisoner outpost during the war in Lothari lands," I answered. "I never went there myself, but I know several important Lothari war prisoners were taken there." "Yes, and after the war we decommissioned it and freed the prisoners. But the fort remained in Imperial control," Gregor added. "However, a recent scout report told us that the Serendainan may have reclaimed the fort and are holding Imperial hostages there. We have no evidence that there are hostages, but it is assumed that they do have them. They're daring us to come and rescue them. Daring us to take the aggressive action." "Sounds like a Serendainan tactic," I growled. "I can't order a full military attack on the fortress, especially if the rumor about hostages turns out to be false. Doing so would spark sympathy points for the Lothari kingdom and might reignite the fires of war. This has to be settled as quietly as possible," the Emperor explained. "And I suppose that's where I come in?" I asked. "Gregory, my son, has gathered 100 loyal men to his side and wishes to retake the fort for the Empire.
But I urged him not to act rashly. He suggested that we send in you first then.
Why me specifically? There are other Silver Force soldiers who could handle this job. But you are a traitor to the Empire, in his eyes. To him, if you succeed, then you pay off your debt to the Empire and get a full pardon. But if you die, then there is no great loss, since you were a villain anyway. How very kind of him, I snarled. I'm not fond of the idea myself, my friend. It will only serve to make your life more difficult, the Empire muttered. But I agreed to it for 2 reasons. The first is that I would prefer a warrior such as you in there to make sure my foolish son doesn't meet a fool's end. Please, protect him as best you can. And the second reason? It will give me the chance to give you a full pardon. We can finally be done with this traitor nonsense, the Emperor smiled. What do you say, Ethan? Will you accept this mission? I stood still a moment and contemplated this job he'd offered. It was a very kind gesture, and it would be far easier to live without the brand of traitor on my back all the time. And then my thoughts turned to Anya. Her life, too, might become easier if people weren't always glaring at me with scrutiny. Maybe this choice was for the best. I ask only one favor. Speak. Allow me to return home first and prepare. There are some affairs I need to set in order. Give me 1 week's time, then I'll meet with your son's forces at the fortress. Of course. What business is it that you need to attend to? Emperor Gregor asked curiously. I paused a moment and smiled. Forgive me, your highness, but that's a topic we'll have to save for after my pardon. But if it helps, perhaps when we finally can speak freely to one another again, we can both blabber about our children. And that was chapter 13. Hope y'all enjoyed that. All right, moving on to Tempest Blade chapter 14, written November 25th, 2019.
You're out of your mind. You know that?
Gaia snapped at me. I'm aware of that, yes, I answered coldly.
Have you stopped to consider what will happen if you go to that prison? You know what the Serendine will do when they see you, don't you?
I ignored him and sat at my usual table, drinking deeply from the mug he'd placed in front of me. It was the dead of night and everyone was either asleep or too drunk to care about what Gaius and I were talking about. I didn't care either way. I had only just gotten back from the Imperial capital and had told Gaius what the Emperor wanted me to do. He was less than thrilled, to say the least, and even more so when I told him I'd agreed to it.
Are you listening to me, boy? Gaius says. The Serendinen obviously reclaimed that prison as a show of force, and it's an obvious bluff. They don't have the resources or manpower to hold that prison for longer than a few months at best. Just ignore them and let the Emperor's son deal with it. Gregory's a competent leader.
If he is, then why hasn't he reached the same conclusion you have? Why bother with it at all? I asked.
I said he was a competent leader. I didn't say he was bright, Gaius grumbled.
I chuckled despite myself and shook my head. I'm sure it'll be okay. I survived more dangerous missions than this.
True as that may be, there's more to think about than just your own well-being,
Gaius acknowledged. Think so? I asked. Seems pretty simple to me. If I do this, I get a full pardon and life will be easier for me and for Anya. I won't be looked at like a fugitive.
If you think killing a few Lothari and getting some official papers drawn up will ever change these people's minds about you, you're as naive as Anya. But that's part of the problem, Gaius growled. Look, I'm not saying this in regards to your safety. Have you considered the girl? What are you going to tell her when she wakes up? That you're off and leaving again to go kill her own kind?
I won't tell her why I have to leave again. It'll only be for a week or two at most. It's just for work. She'll understand. He stopped and rubbed his head, shaking it and groaning. We both exchanged a very heavy silence with each other that comes from two men unsure of what to do.
Maybe you should take her with you, Gaius asked.
Take her to a battleground? I snapped.
Don't take her to the actual prison, but just along for the trip. It would give her more time to spend with you, and you might actually get to talk with her some. And maybe finally tell her the truth.
I already told her.
No, you didn't, Gaius interrupted. You broke down and couldn't do it, so you assumed she understood what you wanted to tell her. But eventually, you have to give it to her straight. She's too young to hear it. That child is smart enough to understand our language quickly and learn new skills fast. I think she's more mature than you give her credit for, Gaius smirked.
It will break her heart, I answered.
I can't do that to her.
It's too much for her to hear.
You don't know that, Ethan, Gaius shrugged. Maybe she's more ready than you think.
I moved my mug aside and leaned into my hands, trying hard to think of any good argument to make. Ever since learning about her father, about Elijah, I'd almost wanted to avoid Anya. I couldn't tell her. I just couldn't. But I knew that eventually I did have to. Every time I looked in her eyes, I saw that day I impaled Elijah Aridin. I'd taken that girl's father. How could I tell her I was the man responsible for everything she'd gone through? I don't know, Gaius. I love her. She's precious to me.
Take it from me, lad. As a father, there are lots of things I had a hard time telling my child, particularly when her mother died.
I sighed.
Roxanne was only 12 when her mother died. She was so young, and I deliberately kept her away from the hospital so that she wouldn't have to see her mother wasting away. When I finally came home and she asked me how her mother was, the last thing I wanted to do was tell her the truth.
Well, did you?
I did. I sat her down beside me and told her the truth. The look on her face. The tears in her eyes.
It hurt, didn't it?
Hurt isn't the right word. It was like my very heart had been squeezed and wrenched from my chest, Gaius muttered. But Roxanne came around. She needed to hear the truth because then she could start healing. That's what Anya needs. She needs to start healing, and the only way she can do that is if you tell her the truth.
Yes, but there's an obvious difference here, Gaius, I pointed out. All you had to do was tell Rox that her mother passed away due to illness. How the hell do I tell Anya that I'm the one who killed her father during the war and she not hate me for it? How do I tell her I'm the man who killed Elijah and...
Ethan!
I stopped, seeing the look of shock and horror on Gaius' face. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking behind me. I spun around to see the stairs up to the room, and my heart instantly felt itself squeeze and wrench itself out of my chest. Anya, I whispered, my voice quaking. She stood there still as a statue, her big eyes filling with tears as her lip quivered like a leaf in the wind. Her hand was held out in front of her, gripping each other tightly until I could see little lines of blood forming under her fingers from gripping her own hands too hard. I stood up out of my chair to move towards her, my hand shaking. Anya? Anya, it's all right. It's all right. Hearing her favorite word only made her shake her little head more, trembling and whimpering in pain and disbelief.
Timotskir,
she squeaked. I winced at the name. The Lothari name for me. I never wanted to hear her address me that way. It was practically a swear word to the Lothari, a social taboo.
Papa was killed by the Thymoskir. Ethan is the...
She struggled to speak, like every word she spoke was stabbing a pain into her chest. I grimaced and slowly bowed my head. I am. In that moment, I may as well have confessed my guilt to the murder of 1,000 men. I would have preferred the Emperor sentence me to execution for any treason that he liked than look in the face of this crying Lothari child. She covered her mouth as tears rolled down her face, looking into the eyes of the man who killed her father, and she knew it.
No, it's no true. Please, you lie.
Anya, let me explain. I tried to move closer. She shrunk back quickly.
You killed Papa. You the Tempest.
Anya, please. I didn't want to kill him. I never got far enough to finish my explanation. I opened my arms and she screamed. Any barfly or drunkard still lingering turned lazily to her as she wailed in agony. She sprinted around me and toward the door. Anya! I tried to grab her, but she slipped away from my hand with ease, tearing through the inn and out into the street. I ran to the door to catch her, but was halted by Gaius grabbing my arm.
Let me go! Let me go, you bastard! You need to stop, Ethan! Let her go! The hell I will! She needs to process this. She needs to figure things out. And if she's caught, what if the townsfolk find her? She's smart enough to know how to hide herself, Gaius barked, grabbing and yanking me back, gripping my arms fiercely. Ethan, I know this hurts, but give her time. Give her the chance to heal. She'll come back to you. Let go of me. She's not your child, Ethan. Get your hands off me or I will cut them off!
I grabbed my sword and pulled it fast, sending Gaius sprawling back in fear. I growled at him like an animal, ready to slay him right there, and then I stopped. I felt the weight of the blade in my hand and the beginnings of tears in my eyes. My hand shook and my knees buckled. I dropped my sword with weak fingers and let it clatter to the ground, and I fell to my knees.
What's all the... Ethan? Dad?
Rox had come out from the kitchen, her hands wet from washing dishes. What have I done? I whispered.
Ethan, it's for the best. Gaius whispered. Breathe, boy, breathe.
I heard her.
I ruined her life. What did I have? Why did I even think of calling her my child? What right did I have?
I whimpered, clutching my chest with shaking hands. Rox rode around the counter and dropped down next to me, wrapping her arms around me in an embrace. I didn't have the strength or will to shake her off.
What happened, Ethan?
Rox, go get him some water, Gaius sighed. He gently placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed it. I'm gonna go look for the kid. Gaius, forgive me. I stopped you because you're the last person she needs to talk to right now. She needs to heal and process what's happened. I'll find her and bring her back. She'll sleep in the kitchen tonight. I want you two apart for a while. No, I have to. This is why I knew it was a bad idea keeping her here. Gaius grumbled. But what's done is done, boy. We can't take back what happened. Rox returned as Gaius talked with a glass of water, which I took in both hands and sipped slowly, trying to calm myself, with minimal success. Gaius walked slowly to the door to grab his coat and walking stick. I tried to stand. Let me go too. I'll help find her. No, Gaius snapped. You stay here and rest. Try to bring your thoughts together, Ethan. This is something you knew might happen, and now you need to heal too.
Listen to him, Ethan,
Rox whispered. I sipped the water again as Gaius walked out into the night. Rox eased me back to my feet and walked me towards the stairs in my room.
It'll be okay.
I doubt that, I answered. I told Anya. She knows about what I did to her father. She knows about everything.
She'll understand, Ethan.
Would you understand if I had killed Gaius? I asked. Rox didn't answer that, but she never lost her concerned and passionate expression. I stumbled into my room and closed the door. I saw that the bed was perfectly well made and the place looked remarkably clean. She'd probably just finished cleaning our room and she'd come to tell me. She'd wanted to see me proud of her, see me smile and tell her she'd done a good job. She'd wanted to see Ethan, her protector and her friend. Instead, she came down and came face to face with the Tempest, the Timet skier, the cold storm. She would never see me the same way again. That beautiful and infectious smile was gone forever from me. Damn it. Damn it! I cried. I threw my fist down on the bed and wept into the sheets on the verge of ripping out my own sword and gutting myself. The pain was so great that even death felt welcome. A tempest is a cold gale. It feels nothing as it rips through everything in its path. It moves and destroys without feeling and without remorse. When it cuts down its prey, it does not look back, but blows ever onward. When the Lothari named me the Tempest Blade, they were referencing this cold and emotionless force of nature when they did. But half the reason I loathe the name is because of this comparison. I do feel. I do cry. And I always look back as I move ahead. I'm not a soulless cold wind. And yet, to that little girl, who I love with all my heart, I'm nothing but a storm that swept away her whole world. How can I ever embrace her again? I fell asleep dreaming of her smile, swept away by a tempest wind. And that was chapter 14. Hooray. Before we move on to the Tale of Tomiki, let me get something to drink real quick. Doing Gaius' voice hurts my throat. Y'all let me know what you thought of that while I go. All right. Okay, guys, we're back. Seems you guys like that one. Yep, Tempest Blade has some dark moments. All right. Well, we're moving on to the Tale of Tomiki. We're on chapter 24, and we are officially starting the next arc of Tomiki. We finished up the Mamaragon arc. We are moving on to the Daikon arc. Sorry. I'm very excited for this one. Now, there is no official arc for Daikon yet. So I will just use another image of Tomiki in the meanwhile. Alright. Let me pull up an image of Tomiki and we'll have it up there, shall we? Alright, that should do it. Alright. Alright, here we go. Tale of Tomiki, Chapter 24. Written June 2nd, 2016. It came streaking through the sky like a comet, and it struck the ground outside of Shan City, leaving a massive crater in the earth. Local authorities rushed out to investigate, and when they arrived, they found something they were not expecting. Rather than some large rock, there was a round sphere made of some strange kind of metal. The police and law enforcement who gathered around it were nervous to approach, but when they heard the strange object suddenly hiss, all of them backed away fast, drawing their weapons. The door on the ball suddenly slid open, and out stepped a young man, at least at first glance. His long dark hair was a mess on his head, and his body had rippling muscles upon him. However, that was where his human-like appearance ended. From his backside grew a long monkey tail, not unlike the Golden Warrior of Shan City. The clothing he wore marked him as something otherworldly, red and blue armor of some kind with only straps over his shoulders, no sleeves to hide his powerful muscles. Over his left eye was a strange device with a screen that was blue in color. He walked out of the pod like a conquering warrior and glanced around him, tapping the device on the side of his head. No one breathed a word against him. All were just staring. Huh. There are some unusually high power levels on this rock, the man grumbled. Nothing that'll prove much of a challenge, though. Disappointing. Hey! One police officer finally spoke up. The man in the crater glared up at the officer who spoke. You! Who are you? You're annoying me, the stranger sneered. The police pulled their guns and aimed them directly at the newcomer. Get on your knees and put your hands behind your head, the officer shouted. The man suddenly smirked and began levitating off the ground, rising out of the crater and hovering above the police around him, who now were all staring open-mouthed at the creature they'd angered. Well, that's rude, isn't it? The man said. You should really know your place in the grand scheme of things. His venomous gaze fell on the police officer who had spoken, and he pointed 2 fingers down at him. There was a flash of light, and suddenly the officer's torso exploded, leaving behind a pair of legs, gushing blood down, and finally collapsing as bits of the man he used to be fell like rain. The police screamed in terror and leapt back from the dead and destroyed corpse. The monster who had done the deadly deed just grinned malevolently. Weaklings and fools. That's all I see here. I'm seeking real sport, the man growled. But if you really wish to know my name, I shall indulge you. My name is Daikon. Remember it well, for what's left of your meaningless lives. Shoot him down! The officers all opened fire on Daikon, and Daikon merely laughed as a bullet bounced off of his body like rubber. Futile, Daikon cackled. He raised his hand over his head, and suddenly a brilliant ball of blue light appeared in it as he threw it down at the officers. The ball exploded on impact with the ground, and all the officers below were thrown for meters across it. Those who were still breathing were unconscious, but that didn't last. Daikon drifted to the ground and walked amongst the corpses. Any that still breathed, he systematically killed with a single kick to their heads, removing them from their shoulders one by one. Finally, only one remained. Officer Jenny Blake was near wetting herself. Daikon glanced down at the remaining officer lady and lowered himself a little to face her. My, what a lovely specimen, he grinned. Tell me, will you consider yourself attractive by the standards of your kind? Jenny felt tears running down her face as she wasn't sure how to answer. Daikon sighed. A female of few words? So be it. But if you would be so kind, perhaps you can answer a few questions for me? Just don't kill me, Jenny begged. I have a son. Just answer me 3 questions, and I promise not to hurt you, Daikon promised. First, what is this place? A city of some sort? You're just outside of Shan City, she squeaked. Question 2. I'm picking up a few strange power levels. Are there warriors in this city, and are they worth my time fighting? He asked. Jenny gulped. We have some mutant activity and the occasional cyborg, but nothing like you, sir. I mean, unless you count the Golden Warrior Tomaki, the police officer cried. Daikon's eyes went wide and he smiled. Tomaki? Now that name sounds Saiyan. Is this Tomaki a Saiyan by any chance? I don't know. Never mind that. Just thinking out loud, Daikon answered sharply. Your 3rd question. Where can I find these warriors? Particularly this Tomaki. The android Melody and Tomaki live in Zhongburo in the heart of the city, but he protects the whole city, Jenny explained. Daikon nodded, and a sadistic grin appeared on his face. Thank you for your information. You're free to go. Suddenly, Daikon's hand began to glow as he lifted up, pointing its destructive bright light directly at Jenny, who was now screaming in terror. You said you wouldn't hurt me! I have a son! Please! I did say that. But what made you think a predator should care about the wants of the prey? And your son? He was unlucky enough to have been born to a weak race. You could hardly blame me for that. Farewell. The explosion of energy swallowed her whole. Her scream of terror was lost in its roar. When the dust settled, there was nothing left. Daikon just rolled his shoulder muscles a little, stretching after being cramped in the Saiyan pod. Mutants, cyborgs, and a golden warrior. That name Tomaki sounds Saiyan in origin. Even a little familiar. Maybe there'll be some fun to be had here after all. Daikon then glanced at the city ahead of him and marched towards it. First, I think I'll mark the occasion. He clenched his fist tightly, ready to gather his own energy together and greet this city of weaklings. His scouter upon his face didn't detect any power levels over 600. Just more mutants, most likely. This is hardly worth it, but I guess even a pile of twigs can make for a decent fire, he remarked. So, let's light this place up.
Faster, Tomaki,
Hayato interrupted. I kicked off the ground and rocketed towards the farthest tree like a missile, rebounding off of it and rocketing to the wall of the dojo, and then off that. I was bouncing and ricocheting around the field like a pinball trapped in a machine, but my speed would even put a pinball to shame. If I went any faster, he might become nothing more than a blur in the wind.
I said faster, Hayato shouted. I can still sense your movements. You must best it. Break that speed. Master, I'm trying, I roared. That's exactly the problem. I told you to do it, not to try to.
Before I knew what was happening, I suddenly felt the harsh sting of a fist striking me across the cheek, as Master Hayato caught me out of midair with a solid punch. I hit the ground and groaned, as if I'd just crashed face first in Hayato's fist.
Ow! I screamed. Tomaki, you have such incredible power. You have easily surpassed me in strength and power, that's obvious. But without technique, control, and discipline, your strength is just that, raw and untamed power. I understand that. But I asked you to help me control my Super Saiyan power, not run through standard exercises, I argued. You've hardly gained control of your power in your current form. How do you expect to control the power of your Super Saiyan form if you can't control this power you have now? You could barely stand up against Mamaragon. Your technique is rusty, your speed and strength are both impressive against an average mutant, but you said yourself you had a bad feeling about point taken, I growled. Hey, you two taking a break?
Hayato and I looked to see a girl with long blonde hair tied back in a ponytail running towards us. I smiled when I saw her and stood up. "Melody!" I called. Melody was hurrying down to us holding a few bottles of water. "I brought some water." Hayato looked down at me and shook her head. "Take a break. But then I want you back at it in 15 minutes. He walked off while Melody sat down with me, handing me a water bottle. "Melody, you don't have to do this, I replied.
"Oh, I owe you my life, Tomiki," she insisted. "Being here to help you train is the least I can do. Besides, I'm the only other person strong enough that could keep up with you at all, After all, I'm the only one you can truly train with."
She giggled. I had been so happy when Melody had recovered. The team of scientists and doctors had managed to remove whatever programming was controlling her decisions, and she'd wanted to return to school with me. But nothing is ever that simple. Ever since the incident where she and I had exchanged blows, the school had been cruel towards Melody, treating her like a criminal, and not considering that she'd been manipulated. Though I stood up for her in school, Melody was eventually forced to be removed by the administration when too many angry parents demanded it. I stuck by her side after that, though, and she appreciated it. In return, she moved into Hayato's dojo to help me train, being my occasional sparring partner. And in that time, she'd gained a few new skills and upgrades to her abilities, making her more powerful, but still not quite my equal. "You don't owe me anything," I argued. "You didn't deserve to die or be kicked out of school."
Whatever. That school wasn't helping me reach my goals anyway. The only reason I started going there was to fulfill the mission my creator wanted for me.
"You don't talk much about him, your creator," I noticed. I sucked from the bottle of water as she sighed and rubbed her side.
His name was Dr. Franco, but aside from that, I'd rather not go into it," Melody answered. "Look, that life is behind me. Thanks to you, I can finally pursue the dreams I want to. I want to be a real singer and go on tours and everything. I don't want to fight my whole life."
"And yet you train with me and help me stop crimes on occasion," I laughed.
"Well, no harm in knowing how to fight," she shrugged. "But you've helped me out so much, Tomiki. You spared my life when I was beaten by you. You let me move into this dojo. Won't your girlfriend get jealous?" she teased.
I blushed a little or a jab at Victoria. "I don't live here. I live with Dr. Nicole most of the time, and besides, she understands the situation," I grumbled. "She's teased me about it too, though."
"You two do make a cute couple," Melody giggled. "I think it's romantic."
"If you say so." I tried hard not to blush and failed.
"And to think that she's dating the hero of Shan, the one who defeated Mamaragon himself. What a lucky lady," Melody continued to tease, and I shook my head. "Well, what about you, though?" I asked. "Don't you have anyone special out there for you?" Melody smiled sadly and shook her head. "I likely never will. I'm a machine. I doubt there are any gentlemen out there who would find me sexually appealing. And even if they did, I was not programmed to function in that manner. Dr. Franco designed me to be a battle machine, not a love bot of any sort," she replied. "I didn't know," I gasped, slightly disgusted by how this Dr. Franco had treated her. "Oh, don't be sorry. Frankly, I don't mind that too much. I can still feel emotion and affection, so it's not really a big loss for me. I'm not exactly looking to marry," Melody grinned. "Well, for what it's worth, I find you attractive," I said. "Oh, stop that. Now you really will make Victoria jealous," Melody winked. "But don't worry, I won't tell her." The two of us laughed for a bit, until I heard Hayato run to the door leading to us. "Master?" I asked.
"There's been an emergency," he shouted. "Bay Borough has been attacked by some supernatural criminal."
"How powerful?" I asked.
"He leveled no less than 4 office complexes with a single blast from his hand," Hayato snapped. "This one won't be easy, Tomiki. And if the news is correct..."
"If it's correct?"
"They said this criminal landed in a space pod outside the city, and he sports a monkey tail."
I rose to my feet fast, the bottle of water in my hand dropping. I felt myself freeze and my hands began to sweat. A strange feeling began to sweep over me at this news. It was more than I expected, and the last thing I would ever consider. There's another Saiyan here? One of my own kind?" I asked.
"Tomiki," Melody whispered, "would you like me to come too?"
"Yeah, but don't get involved," I snapped. "I want to meet this Saiyan. I want to know about my people."
"Tomiki, be careful," Hayato warned. "Remember, your mother died hoping you'd become better than your kind. Become more than just a killing brute."
"I'm not going to become like him, Master. I can't pass up the chance to learn more about where I came from," I muttered. "I need to do this, Hayato."
"Be careful, Tomiki,"
Hayato warned. I ran out into the field and rocketed into the air, a trail behind me, marking where I'd been. I flew north to Bay Borough, my thoughts racing about how I'd deal with the Saiyan there. How I'd speak to him. What he'd be like. I wasn't sure, but my heart raced with both fear and excitement. This fight would be like none other I'd ever had. And that was chapter 24. So let us continue. The Tale of Tomoki, Chapter 25, written June 3rd, 2016. It took little to no time for me to fly to Bay Borough. It was only a 20-minute flight to Bay, and I already felt my heart rate increasing. Smoke was rising from the center of the metropolis. I glanced back and could see a small streak running along the midway below me. I smiled to myself, recognizing Melody running beneath me. She didn't want to fight, and she didn't want me to fight alone. If it really was a Saiyan, I wouldn't know if I'd need the help or not. I wasn't sure what to expect, but if it really was a Saiyan here on Earth, I had to be the one to face him. I closed my eyes and focused on any strong energy in the area. I felt out the energy of everything around me, and I felt it within moments. A massive amount of energy ahead of me, more than I'd ever felt before. It was overwhelming, easily surpassing Master Hayato, Melody, and even Mamaragon. I dove down, following the source, forgetting about Melody, and instead trying to catch sight of the source of the power. I landed in a park where trees had been ripped up and uprooted like common plants. The ground was scorched, and there were a few bodies of police in military uniforms scattered around. Standing amongst them was a man, close to my age by the look of him, but it was hard to tell as I knew we Saiyans aged slower than humans. He wore body armor over him that was blue and red in color. He had dark, wild hair that was spiked and looked as fierce as his dark eyes. I saw his tail wrapped like a belt around his middle, and instantly I was intrigued. There was no mistaking that tail or that kind of power. This was a Saiyan. I landed near him, and the Saiyan turned around to lock eyes with me. Our eyes met, and an unspoken sensation flashed between us, as if this meeting were fate itself. Two Saiyans destined to fight, destined to destroy each other. I felt myself clench up in anticipation, but to my surprise, the other Saiyan just stood there. "Well, I'll be damned," he laughed. "I was right. There was another Saiyan on this rock." His face then burst into a wide grin. "So there are more of us out there. And here I thought things were getting boring." I looked surprised. I know this as he laughed at me. "So it's Tomoki, right? I've heard your name a few times since getting here. That's a Saiyan name, no doubt about it." He reached up to a strange device on his face, then covered one eye and clicked. His smile faded to a frown. "But judging by your clothing, you were likely raised here. And your power level's pathetic. 5,000? That's really all you've got? I guess that means you're another one of the weaklings sent away at birth. Who are you?" I demanded. "What do you want here?" "That'd be a yes," the Saiyan laughed. "Well, all the same, I suppose it's been a long time since I met another one of my own kind, so I'll indulge you. The name is Daikon, one of the elites of planet Vegeta, and former captain of the 2nd Destroyer Company. Though I'm all that's left now of my former comrades." As he spoke of his lost comrades, I noticed with a sense of fear that he was still smiling. Daikon, 2nd Destroyer Company, elites. I was struggling to wrap my mind around it all. As I did, the grin got broader on his face. "I see I've confused you. Definitely a weakling sent here at birth. Well, that's only natural. The lesser should worry only about their own lot in life, and not concern themselves with their betters. All you need to know, weakling, is that while you were down here failing at even the most rudimentary task of exterminating this world, I have razed entire planets to dust, conquered whole worlds, and butchered countless foes. You should be honored to even stand in my presence. You still didn't tell me why you're here," I shouted. Daikon threw back his head and laughed, raising his hand to a nearby cluster of trees. "I'm cleaning up your mess," he laughed. As he spoke, a blast of light fired from his hand and reduced the tree cluster to a burning cinder. "Your mission, Tomoki, was to conquer this useless planet and prove yourself worthy as a Saiyan or die trying. You're not dead, and this planet is far from destroyed. So what's your excuse? Lose your nerve? Force into submission? Don't tell me they captured you." "I chose a new path for myself," I replied. "I'm protecting this world." Daikon stopped his destruction and then turned to face me. His face twisted in a look of disgust. "That's a joke, right? You're kidding. You mean to tell me you've abandoned your nature as well as your mission? We Saiyans are the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Destruction and conquest is in our very nature. Not only were you born weak, but you can't even raise yourself to the rank of a mere warrior?" I felt something stir at me in that accusation. Was it my pride? Yes. There was something in my blood that bristled at the insult to my Saiyan pride.
Watch what you say, I challenged. Didn't you say you were all that was left of your company or whatever? Clearly you've suffered your own losses. Even an elite isn't infallible.
Losses?
Daikon asked, surprised. His grin was back on his face and a glint in his eye that suddenly turned my stomach.
What losses?
I've never lost a fight in my life. But you just said, I said I was the last of Second Destroyer Company.
Because I killed the others.
I felt my blood run cold. He killed his own comrades?
Don't compare me to a weakling like you. I only detached myself from the weaklings who attempted to rule over me like King Vegeta. I serve no master now, but my nature couldn't be more important to me. You, on the other hand, abandon your purpose and your nature. You're a disgrace to your race.
He started marching towards me as he tapped an odd device on his face over his left eye. He built up ki into his hand and pointed it at me.
Killing a weakling like you is a mercy.
He fired the blast from his hand, and I reacted instantly, leaping out of the way and rebounding off a nearby car and rocketing towards him. I pulled back my fist and prepared to strike him across the cheek. He saw me coming and caught my wrist in his hand, flipping me over his shoulder and breaking my momentum with a single motion. Ah! I shouted as I hit the ground. I rolled away and he smirked, touching the face device again.
Oh, I see you were holding back some of your power. That attack you just did spiked you up to 9,000. Can you go beyond that? Are you holding anything else back? I'll show you, you arrogant ass!
I swung my leg up to meet him and he blocked, but he was forced to release me as I jumped out of his grip and away. Ready to fight for real? I asked.
When you are,
Daikon yawned. I hissed in anger. I couldn't use Super Saiyan. I still lacked control of it. And in a populated city like this, going all out could be dangerous. But it shouldn't be a problem either way. If I could use my training with control, technique, and speed, I could overwhelm him. It was my only chance. But there was one thing that worried me. He had killed his own comrades. Other Saiyans. If he could kill other Saiyans on his level, what could I do? I didn't have time to think about it. I had to fight. Let's go! When Melody rounded the corner to the park where Tomoki had vanished to, she looked and saw nothing at first. Her eyes skimmed the battlefield and saw blurs bursting around the park. There were blurs of figures rebounding off buildings and cars like rubber bullets, springing from place to place and exploding with tremendous force off of each other. The speed of their strikes was hard to keep up with. It was Tomoki and the strange Saiyan she'd been warned about. Was this what a battle between Saiyans looked like? At one point she saw the two locked in a stalemate of rapid-fire punches, but there was a clear difference between the two, and that difference terrified Melody. Tomoki's technique was solid. His composure proved that. He was snarling and working with all his might to overpower his opponent and block incoming attacks while countering. It was like watching a savage animal defending his territory from a pack of wolves. But when she looked at the other Saiyan, he was smirking. There was a sinister, almost giddy smile on his face as he struck and defended against Tomoki. Was he even trying? How strong was this enemy? Damn you! I screamed. I leapt away from him, panting heavily. I had managed to keep my guard up, and yet he penetrated it so many times. How had he done it? Daikon was breathing heavily too, but he never lost his smile. That's an interesting skill you have there. You can somehow anticipate my attacks the second I make them. Clever. Some kind of neat trick this world taught you? But I got a question, weakling. What good is being able to anticipate what I'm going to do if you can't do anything about it? He sprinted at me and we collided. I struck fast, and with a high kick, he dodged, grabbing my leg and throwing me back. I fired a dual pair of ki blasts at him, and he knocked them aside like they were nothing. He fired his own ki wave, and I leapt once more, losing my balance. Just as I managed to regain my footing, I looked to see him closing the distance. How did... His fist came down like a force of nature, smashing me into the ground and knocking blood from my mouth. Did you really think you stood a chance against me? He scoffed. You might be a Saiyan in body, but you fall grossly short on skill and power. You son of a bitch, I hissed, trying to climb up. I was shoved back down by a kick from his deadly foot, and he pressed it down, holding me there. With enough training and ferocity, you could be quite the formidable warrior. But you bask in your limited power and pretend it's something worthwhile. You will never compare to a Saiyan elite like me. Get off! I roared, powering up and sending him jumping backwards and away from me. I climbed on my feet, trembling with anger. I wanted to release my Super Saiyan power. I'd shut him up with that golden aura, no doubt.
but there were still innocent people within the area. I could sense them, including Melody, who I could tell was nearby. If I hurt them in my rage, I'd never live it down.
Face your weakness, boy,
He laughed. My name is Tomiki, not weakling or boy, I snapped.
And you say that like I'm supposed to give a shit? You're a weakling not worthy of a title or a name.
I've had enough, I screamed. I charged him and pulled back my hand, gathering ki into the center. Reject! I slammed my palm into his chest and fired my compressed ki wave. He took the brunt and did a handspring to recover. He growled in frustration at the strike.
Cute. My turn.
Daikon suddenly held out both hands and fired a swarm of small ki blasts that were like a school of angry birds, charging from all directions, far too many for me to block or dodge. I tried to leap away, but they followed me as living animals, seeking me out and landing, striking with tremendous force and rage. I screamed in pain and tried to get distance. I was outraged. I was in pain. I felt the urge to collapse and start coughing. As I struggled to get back to my feet, Daikon just tapped his chin.
You know, come to think of it, you remind me of someone.
He walked back and forth a few paces. I tried to throw a ki blast at him, and he knocked it aside with a wave of his hand like he barely registered it.
Ah, yes. You wouldn't know a Solera, would you?
Who? I hissed.
Wait a sec.
He smirked and his teeth bared in amusement.
Don't tell me. Are you Solera's brat?
My whole world stopped, and the pain in my body seemed to fade a fraction. Solera's brat? Who? What? I asked.
Of course! You've got those same eyes as she did. It makes sense now. She was always pretty soft for a Saiyan. I'd heard she'd had a kid, but to think you'd end up here of all places. What a small galaxy.
Is Solera my...
Aw, you seem confused. Tell you what, if you entertain me a bit more, I'll tell you about her. Might even let you in on a little more about our people. You seem interested, which is good. But you gotta earn that right, little weakling. Tell me! The prey doesn't make demands of the predator, Daikon smirked.
I felt anger flare up. I was furious. I needed to know what he knew. Had he just revealed the name of my real mother? Did he know her? Who was she? Where was she? Why did she let me go? Was it because I was weak? Was she anything like Daikon? What are Saiyans? What the hell am I? Fine. You want to be impressed? I finally launched myself up, the pain a memory in my head. I'm ending this. I'm gonna end you right now! I started with a flying leap towards the far-off apartment building. I then bounced off a nearby office complex and rocketed to the ground not far away. I bounced, jumping like a leapfrog until I was now bouncing all around the field, hitting points on the ground or objects around me and shooting all around the battlefield. It was the same thing I'd done with Hayato earlier today. It was an evasive skill, as well as a way to find a flaw in his defenses. More speed! More speed! I hissed, picking up the pace with my leaping. I had to get as much power as I could. More! 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 I was a blur now. I wasn't even visible to the naked eye. I had to hit now. Now or never.
You done springing around like a fool? Daikon asked. What's this supposed to do, anyway? Make me dizzy or kill me from boredom? You're not a real Saiyan. You're a joke.
He yawned, and I saw my opening. I struck him hard with the force of a mortar cannon, and his jaw snapped to the right as he flew backward, like he'd been ejected from a cannon and crashed into a wall. Though my speed wasn't exactly the speed Hayato expected of me, it'd done the job here. Still think I'm a joke?
Now that was irritating,
Daikon snarled, crawling out of the crater.
That actually hurt, you little shit.
Then I'm not done! I pulled back my hands to gather ki and fired a Kamehameha blast. It was my most powerful ki wave, and it was going to hit Daikon directly. He stood and held out his hands as if to catch it, and with a roar, he stopped the ki blast and held it at bay. I pushed harder, but it was no use. Daikon was outmatching it. With a cry of anger, he threw the blast aside and sprinted at me. I threw up my defenses, but he moved too fast for me to prepare for it. His fist found my stomach, and I coughed and felt my whole body shake in agony. As I was thrown back, I felt a tremendous pain as Daikon grabbed me by the tail and pulled hard.
Ah! I see you haven't overcome your basic weaknesses.
Your tail is still weak and untrained, Daikon smirked. He flung me across the park with a grunt, and I sailed into the side of a tree, splintering it. I struggled to get up and fight back. I'd hit him with my Python Ballista, my strongest physical attack, and the Kamehameha wave. But it wasn't enough. It took tremendous effort to build up that much power. I was too weak. I was untrained. Daikon was right about me. He was just too strong. And here I got my hopes up. But your power level's plummeting like a falling stone, Daikon growled. Perhaps with some training and some effort, you could have made a decent challenge. But you, like so many other Saiyans before you, are content with the power nature and biology have given you. And thus, you could never defeat me. As he jeered at me, I debated if I could. Should I use Super Saiyan? If I used it, I'd win. But at what cost? Daikon's power was still untested. He was a monster. Would our colliding cause more collateral damage? I had to do what I did with Mamaragon. Get him out of the city and away from civilians. I'd flown with Mamaragon into the sky before. Could I do that here? Or maybe get him further away? I climbed on my feet, shaking and struggling. Why don't we take this fight outside the city then? I asked, praying he'd take the bait. I'll show you what I can really do. Take it outside? So that a little fight won't hurt the bystanders. That's yet another empathetic weakness, Daikon growled. No, if we fight, weakling, we do it here and now. Let go of your sympathy. Let go of that ridiculous sense of duty you have to these fools. It'll make you stronger. Or more like you, I hissed. And I'll never be like you, Daikon. Correct, Daikon sighed. Because an insect can never become anything more than what it is. Daikon pulled back his hand, energy sparking from it like lightning. Made me nostalgic for when I fought Mamaragon. Things felt simpler then. Easier. Take comfort in that I let you die in battle. Tomiki, no! I turned to see Melody standing a few hundred meters away looking terrified. Daikon noticed her too and his smile faded. A friend of yours? He asked. What do you care? I hissed. Daikon suddenly looked at her, and then me, and he smiled a little. A cold and sadistic sneer that I knew I would regret. Hey, weakling. Want to know a little secret about us Saiyans? He asked. We're born warriors. We grow stronger with every fight. Every victory and every defeat teaches us, enhances us, and we grow stronger and stronger endlessly. That's why Saiyans grow older so slowly, so we can fight and improve forever. Judging by your hidden strength just now, I'd say you've not pushed yourself quite far enough yet. But I can see potential. Bastard, what are you getting at? I barked. You're destined to die by my hand, weakling, Daikon laughed. But I want it to be a fight worth having between two Saiyans. So here's what you do, weakling. I'm leaving the city for a while to find some more entertainment. While I'm gone, kill her. My heart stopped and I felt my eyes snap back to him. Kill her? Kill her. Your power level is what, 8,000, 9,000, maybe a little more? So it's nothing amazing, but it should do. Destroy her and every other mutant and cyborg in the city. Grow stronger. Push your limited potential to its maximum height. Then when you're done, keep fighting, keep killing, and when you do, I'm sure you'll become far stronger, and maybe even worth my time. Then killing you won't feel so boring. You're insane, I shouted. If you impress me when we fight, I'll tell you all you want about Celera and our race. As a consolation, of course, before I end your life. Daikon smirked. He looked at me and he suddenly gave a look of recognition. Haven't seen that expression in a long time. You're definitely her brat. I didn't say anything to that. I was too angry and humiliated. I'd been soundly destroyed, defeated by my own kind. And now he was taunting me, daring me to get stronger by killing the people I cared about. And everyone else for that matter. Is that how Saiyans get stronger? Is that what my mother did? My family? My race? What was a Saiyan? See you soon, you little shit. Daikon then blasts into the sky and out of sight, his power level getting weaker and weaker as it flew further away. Tomiki, are you okay? Melody didn't need to say it. I already knew what she was thinking, because I was thinking it too. I'd lost. I'd been defeated by my own kind and been spared by him too. It was the ultimate humiliation. Instead of killing me, he let me wallow in my defeat. Was this what Saiyans were capable of? Had I been fooling myself this whole time?
I thought I'd been growing stronger. Was I really so far behind the elite of my own people? I'll be okay, Melody. You did your best. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Of course I do, I argued. I should have died. Tomaki, I need to get stronger. I can't let him have his way, I shouted. If only we hadn't been in the city. Damn it! Tomaki, you fought him off, and he left Shan City. You didn't need to prove anything to him. You won this fight. No one else was hurt, and he's gone off somewhere else. He might have been stronger, but you'll get stronger too. Next time he shows up, you'll beat him for sure. Melody encouraged me. I nodded, allowing a small flame of hope to light inside me. It was possible. It had to be. I had to be ready. I wouldn't let it end this way. Not again. But how would I do it? My normal training methods didn't seem sufficient. Was the only way to match that animal? To take his advice? No. No, I couldn't do that. But if I didn't, next time I fight him, I whispered, he'll wish he'd killed me. That's the spirit, I think, Melody laughed. I didn't smile back. For the first time in years, my heart had gone back to my roots, to my race. Celera, Saiyans, elites. What were Saiyans? What was I? Was I destined to be like Daikon? And if so, did that mean that Belle, Hayato, and Victoria, were they all wrong about me? What the hell am I? I hissed. And that was chapter 25. Let me know what you guys think while I take a drink. All right. Well, with that out of the way, it's time to move on to Monster Club. Monster Club Chapter 37, I believe. We left off with... I think we left off on Chapter 37, and that is the chapter where... Let me skim through it real fast. Ah, this one. Well, not a lot happens here, but we are getting moving. And then, then I think Chapter 38 is another memory chapter. Anyway, let me go ahead and take the Saiyan image off. Let's put a Monster Club image on. Let me figure out which Monster Club image I want to use. We used Michelle last time. How about we use... Let's use Sarah this time. All right. That'll do. I'll try to make an image of Daikon at some point. Actually, I think I might have one. Let me take a look. Okay, all right. I did make an image. I forgot about this. I genuinely forgot that I made an image. I'll share it with you guys.
Here, let me remove Sarah real quick, and I will show you guys the image of Daikon. That's kind of what I had in mind. Do you have a werecroc, Raven? No, I don't have one. Let me know what you guys think, and then I'll take it down. Alright, well, I'll take it down now. And I'll put Sarah back up, because we're moving on to Monster Club. No more Tomoki tonight. Well, I'm sorry, Hannah. I have to trust in the AI to try. And if you put in Saiyan in the AI, it automatically goes to either Vegeta or Goku. And that I don't want a copy of those. Alright, Sarah going back up. Like I said, we're in the Daikon arc of Tomoki, so he's going to be the big baddie for a while. I introduced him kind of early, but you'll see a lot more going on. Yeah, I really like writing Daikon. Daikon is real. He's one of the more evil characters I've created. True story, Daikon actually, Daikon is a vegetable name. It's another name for a radish. And when I was writing him originally, he wasn't originally my character. What happened was, when I wrote the first arc of Tomoki, there was this guy on DeviantArt who came up with a Saiyan of his own named Griff, and asked me if Griff could become a rival of Tomoki. And so I agreed, and I wrote out the character. And Griff, as a character, was not well thought out. I even told the guy this. I said, I don't think Griff is a well thought out character. All he is he's an egotist, and he brags a lot, and he flirts with women. Like, that's all he really does. So he didn't really make a very compelling villain. He just kind of made like a braggart. And I didn't like that. I wanted to do more with him. But over time, the guy on DeviantArt basically said, you know what, I'm kind of done with Griff. You do what you want with him. And so I said, okay. So I have remade Griff into Daikon, giving him an actual Saiyan name, and writing him more as a villain. So yeah, like, the difference between Daikon and Griff is Griff, like, let me put it this way. In the original story that I wrote, Griff saw Melody and flirted with her. That was his whole thing. He flirted with her. Because he's an egotistical bastard. In this one, he saw her and immediately thought, ah, okay, you're a friend of Tomoki's? Okay, Tomoki, go kill her. Kill her and get stronger, because I want to be entertained by you. I want to be entertained by our fight. In other words, I got to design Daikon. Yeah, Hannah, you got a lot of designing to do. Anyway. Either that or I could get Jay to do it. Alright, well, it's time to get started. We gotta get to it. Alright. Let's pull up Monster Club Chapter 37, written January 16th, 2016. Griff makes you think of Gaston. They're actually pretty similar, to be honest with you. I'll be honest, I didn't enjoy Griff as a character. He was hard to write because there wasn't a lot of meat to him. When I write a villain, I try to create a villain who, you know, you want to see destroyed or has a unique outlook. Like, take Mamaragon. You didn't like him because he was the antagonist, but you kind of understood where he was coming from in the end. You kind of got how he got to be who he was. And with Daikon, you don't care how he got to be how he was. You know he's evil. You know he's a monster, even by Saiyan standards. Like, let me put it this way. When I saw Vegeta kill Nappa because Nappa was paralyzed, that spoke to me, because that's the first time I've seen, like, a character who so willingly killed his own friend just because he was holding him back. That was the first time I saw that as a kid. And I thought, oh, that's awful. That's awful. I mean, I've seen monsters and villains get destroyed or defeated by the heroes. Like, take Harley Quinn, for example. Harley Quinn could be defeated by Batman, but she'll always end up back at Joker's side, you know? Like that's something you always expect to happen. The henchmen always end up showing up back with the villain again at some point. It was the first time I'd seen a villain just take out his own comrade like it was nothing, and I thought, that's evil. That's someone who cares nothing for other people or for life. But anyway. No, you will not allow Jay to design it. Okay, understood. All right. All right. Here we go. Monster Club Chapter 37. I've wasted enough time. Let's get started. Fishing with Naomi was not the same as shooting fish in a barrel. Naomi's method was something she called the raining food approach. By swimming rapidly under the current, when a small school of fish would swim past, she stopped suddenly and kicked up the water fiercely by thrashing and kicking, throwing the fish down on force and out from under her. Any caught within her reach were snagged in her grip and her teeth. She'd then toss them into the air and onto the land, where Abraham would be waiting to catch them and gather them. The process was long but fruitful, as every 15 to 30 minutes Naomi would fire out another 5 or 6 fish with ease. After a few hours of this, Abraham had gathered at least 30 flopping and wet fish, more than enough to last the group for a few days. Naomi quickly came crawling out of the water. Abraham looked away, blushing from her naked body. She noticed and smirked.
Wow, you really are innocent, huh? She laughed. Well, you can look now. I'm clothed.
Abraham turned and breathed a sigh of relief when he saw she was dressed. She looked at her catch and crossed her arms over her chest, leaning down.
Not a bad haul. Not my best, though. Best start skinning and gutting. Don't tell me you don't know how to skin and gut a fish, Naomi growled.
Abraham shook his head and she groaned in frustration.
You really are useless, aren't you? Here, let me show you.
She grabbed a bucket and pulled out one of 2 long, odd-shaped knives. She grabbed a fish firmly and held it up for him to see.
First, you grip it firmly like this, and then you slice along the belly.
She took the knife with efficiency and proficiency and then made Abraham gulp. She sliced from the neck of the fish straight down the center of the belly and watched it bleed out.
Then you take it and run it down the sides like this, slicing off the scales like so.
Her moves were fluid and precise. She was so fast with her slices that Abraham became rather unnerved. If she wanted, she could gut him as easily as that fish, and the look in her eye was so savage that he knew she had every means to do so. I need to go use the bathroom, Abraham grumbled.
Sure, pick a tree,
Naomi answered, finishing up the first fish and moving on to the next one. Abraham cringed at the idea of peeing in front of a woman, even one as shameless as Naomi. I'm going to go somewhere a bit more private, he announced, running away and into the deeper woods. He didn't glance back at Naomi, just wanted to put some distance between her and that knife, and those cold eyes. After a good distance was made, Abraham leaned against a tree and began to unzip his pants to relieve himself. But just as he did this, though, he froze, hearing the sound of the leaves above him shifting. He looked up, but only saw birds flying away lazily. He must have frightened them, and yet he couldn't make the goosebumps running down his spine go away. Man, I just need to be getting more and more jumpy as the days go by, he muttered. If Michelle or Katie saw me, they'd laugh. As he relieved himself, he looked up at the oak tree not far and saw a glimmering line on it that shone like a reflective mirror. He zipped up his pants and knelt down to touch it. It was a long line, made of silk. It was probably one of Sarah's thread tripwires. If something stepped on it, the line would send vibrations back to the center point of the web where Sarah could detect what had stepped on it, how big it was, or how many were coming. She'd done the same thing back at the cottage, and now she and Annie were setting up a new system. How far along had she come? The thought of the others made Abraham smile a little. Despite Naomi's coldness and Mato's utter aggression, he still found faith and compassion from the others. If he had them, he felt confident. Just as he was about to stand, he saw something else glint in the sunlight. It was tucked nicely in the grass, but he could just barely make it out. Still on his hands and knees, he crawled to it and plucked it up from the ground. It was smooth and small, only slightly smaller than his pinky digit, but the shape was unnerving as he'd seen it before, but only a few times. He felt his fingers tremble as he held the small, hard object. It was a bullet. The texture and the color made it even more frightening. Silver, he gasped. A silver bullet. Only hunters carried these, and that meant there had to be hunters nearby, or at least nearby recently. Who? Was it Morgan again? The Dawnbringers? Something worse? Had they tracked the gang here? Had they unintentionally endangered Naomi, Mato, and Tori? I gotta tell Michelle. Or Naomi. No, if I tell Naomi, she'll think I had it with me all along. Michelle or Asher, maybe? They'll listen to me. He glanced up to start his way back quickly, realizing he didn't know which way to go back. Naomi was the only one who knew. Damn it all. Something wrong, human? Abraham spun around to face what he heard the growl. Behind him, leaning against a tree with an axe in his hand, was a tall and pissed Mato who was glaring at him with the same eyes he had from earlier. Yeah, I found this thing on the ground, and I thought it might be a threat to you or the others. I wanted to show Michelle a relic from a battle not long ago, he snapped.
We've had humans here in the past, intent on killing us, and we dealt with them. That bullet likely belonged to one of them.
But it's silver. Only professional humans would carry...
All humans,
Mato snapped.
are hunters.
He stood up straight and walked towards Abraham, snatching the bullet from his hand and glaring at it. He sneered and crushed it between his fingers. Even when not in his bear form, his strength was incredible. He was like Michelle after all. Look, I'm not like these hunters. I told you that, Abraham explained.
Yeah, you told me, and I don't believe it. You might not have the weapons or the know-how, but you are a human, and therefore can't be trusted. I've trusted humans before, and that betrayed me. I will not make the same mistake again, not after what happened to Val.
Abraham blinked a moment and looked at Mato in confusion. Who's Val? Mato snarled and mentioned the name and turned away, clenching his fists.
Never mind. Just know I killed that treacherous bastard.
Is that what you're gonna do? Kill me too? Abraham asked, feeling his body shiver.
No. As much as I want to. If I kill you out here, that vampire would slaughter me.
Abraham whispered a private thank you to Asher despite him not being there.
But I am here to tell you to leave while you can.
Why? Abraham asked.
What good are you to them?
Mato asked. Even if I did trust you, how could you possibly be beneficial? I was watching you while you fished with Naomi. You can't catch fish. You can't even gut them without turning pale. You can't hunt. You can't fight. You can barely hide. You're pathetic and worthless. My family doesn't think so. In a pack, Mato pushed, baring his teeth. You either contribute to the hunt or you're left out of the spoils. The one too weak and feeble to do anything is often the one that gets devoured by the others. Are you prepared to be devoured by your so-called family? Abraham glared back at Mato and rolled the words over in his head. If Mato had asked him that back on the beach, back before their cottage blew up thanks to Morgan, he would have probably listened, and even ran away like Mato said. But something deep in Abraham's heart told him that Mato was wrong, and he wouldn't hear it. No, Abraham retorted. No, I don't believe it. There's my family, and I'm a part of it. Whether you want to see that is your issue. Now, if you'll excuse me... Abraham turned to walk away when he heard a furious roar. He turned around just in time to see Mato grab him by the shirt collar and yank him off his feet, snarling and spitting like a wild animal.
Why won't you get it through that thick skull of yours? You don't belong with them.
Let me go, Abraham shouted.
We are as different as night and day. We exist to kill each other.
Why? Abraham cried. Why do we have to?
Are you really so stupid? Don't be ignorant like I was, boy, and you might just live a little longer. It's nature. It's how we are. Monsters and humans can't coexist without bloodshed. It's kill or be killed. It's as simple as that. If I'd understood that a few years ago, then maybe...
He stopped talking. As terrified as Abraham felt, he couldn't bring himself to hate Mato. There was a pain in his voice and in his eyes. He truly loathed humanity, but it seemed that it was not an unjustified hatred. He'd lost something or someone, and he had a feeling it was done by human hands. Snarling in pain and enraged, Mato threw Abraham to the ground, again his hair bristling.
Ow! Why can't you understand? Aren't you afraid of me? Doesn't my existence disgust you?
Mato, I am afraid of you, but you don't disgust me. I'm afraid because you're threatening to kill me, not because you're a shape-shifting bear man.
Skinwalker, he snapped, and don't play dumb with me. That spider girl you have in your group, men would cower before such a thing. The snake girl, the little witch, the vampire, they are all unnatural to your eyes. It is in your nature to be afraid and disgusted by us.
Sorry, but I'm not, Abraham retorted. His words only seemed to piss Mato off further. As he stormed towards him, slowly growing taller and hairier.
You're lying, just like they all lie. I won't let anyone die again. Not again!
He raised his bare paw as he finally completed his change into a huge grizzly. Abraham covered his face as he prepared for the lethal blow.
Get away from him!
The sound of a furious hiss caused Abraham to look up in time. From the treetops, Katie came shooting down like a missile, slamming her body into Mato and coiling around him rapidly like a serpent. She constricted, holding his arms back and stiffening her body to the point that he couldn't even move his arms. With a furious roar of frustration, Mato heaved and shook, trying to dislodge her from his body, but Katie held firm. Her eyes flashed with a fire that Abraham had only seen once before. The same fire in her eyes the day that she'd startled her in her bed. She was in a rage.
Let go! Get off me! Mato roared. I should snap your spine like a twig, Katie hissed.
Abraham, are you all right?
Abraham turned to see Annie running towards him and hugging his arm tightly. Annie, what are you and Katie doing here? I called them. Abraham looked up to see Naomi and Sarah walking towards him from behind. Sarah scurried past Abraham and turned around, launching her webbing from her abdomen, bursts of silky thread. The thread piled on top of each other, and using her front legs to control the direction, soon Mato was coated in sticky threads. Katie managed to slither her way away from him before the thread got too sticky, but she never lost that fire in her eyes. Mato struggled and swiped, but the more he attempted to break the thread, the more threads Sarah piled on, her 6 red eyes burning like Katie's. Forgive me, Abraham. I hope we weren't too late. Are you injured? She asked. No, I'm okay, Abraham muttered. Naomi leaned down and took Abraham's arm to inspect it. There was a slight gash there, and for where Mato had thrown Abraham to the ground, but otherwise he was unharmed. This could have been worse. I fear this is my fault, Naomi replied. I knew Mato was in the area. I shouldn't have let you wander off like that. You called Sarah and Katie? Abraham asked. When I heard Mato roaring, I knew you and he must have crossed paths. I called out to Katie, who was nearby spying on us. How did you know that? Katie snapped. I fully expected you to follow. None of you trust us yet, so I had a feeling one of you would tail us, but that's beside the point. Once I told Katie, she hurried off to go get help. But what about you two? Abraham asked. The threads, Annie responded, pointing to the ground where one of the threads was broken. Sarah felt that one of the threads had been disturbed, and when she heard the roar, she told me to run ahead and check on you. If only I'd been quicker, Sarah sneered. Sarah, who was always so happy and smiling most of the time, now looked positively furious with herself for having allowed Mato to hurt me. I'm so sorry, Abraham. It's not your fault, or Naomi's. But, Naomi, I don't mean to sound rude, but I thought you'd been okay with him killing me, Abraham pointed out. Naomi shook her head and sighed. Humans are a weak and pathetic species, but I have no interest in seeing you all dead. You've done nothing to harm us or my kind, so I have no reason or desire to see you dead. Mato, on the other hand, sees things quite differently, Naomi explained. Mato was still breathing heavily, now unable to even struggle under all the threads. Sarah stopped tying him up and turned to Abraham, tears in her 6 large eyes. Abraham, are you hurt bad? She scurried to his side and lifted his arm as to see it bleed. Oh, does it hurt? I'm fine, Sarah, Abraham assured her. Let me bandage that up right away. She quickly began spinning more silk as Katie slid beside him as well, hugging his side. Let's bandage him up and then we get back, Katie hissed, glaring at Mato furiously. Annie climbed on Sarah's back, sitting on her abdomen, and Sarah gave a nod. Right, of course. How am I supposed to untie Mato? Naomi asked. I'll untie him after we tend to Abraham, Sarah snapped back angrily. Abraham had never heard Sarah so angry before. Were they really so worried about it? Naomi shrugged and walked to Mato, sitting beside her as if to keep him company. Abraham tried to listen to what she said over Sarah and Katie fussing over him, and he could make out only one solitary sentence before they were out of earshot. Mato, I understand how you feel, but don't blame him for what happened to Val. It wasn't him who did it. Abraham tried to hear the rest, but soon all sound was muffled by Sarah, hugging his head tightly and crying a little, the worry and concern finally getting to her. I'm okay, calm down, Abraham laughed, trying to rub it off. Deep in his heart, though, he knew things weren't okay. Not yet. And that was chapter 37. Next up is chapter 38, where we get Annie's memory. All right. Well, we'll go ahead into chapter 38, written March 7, 2016. Annie's memory. Weirdo, freak, baby, dork. Mommy always used to say that words are meant to help. They are what separate us from the animal. Daddy would say that if you can't say a kind thing, it's better to say nothing at all. So why then must words be so painful? I hate those words. I hate the ones who cut me with them day after day. Kids back home were not so rude and bad, but these kids were so horrible. Were all American children like this? I just wanted to crawl in a corner and hide. Never come out again and just live there with Mr. Blackie. I clutched Mr. Blackie to my chest as I hid under the jungle gym outside of the recess ground. I miss home, Blackie, I whispered. I want to go home. I want to get away from those children and their mean words. How long had I been here in America? How many days had I been hiding, running from place to place with nowhere to lay down and be tuckered in and out in the night? I didn't keep count, because the number might hurt me even more. I'd always heard such great stories about America from Daddy, about how beautiful it was and how everyone was free. It seemed like a fantasy. But here I was, and I didn't want anything to do with it. I wanted to go home again. I wanted Mommy and Daddy to be there. Will Daddy be coming soon? I looked at Mr. Blackie as if expecting him to answer me. Sometimes I wish he would. I want someone to talk to who will be nice to me back. Someone like Mommy and Daddy. I sniffled a little, feeling pressure in my nose and realizing that it was running a bit. I rubbed my nose with my sleeve and silently wished Mommy was there to correct me for doing that. I could hear her voice now. That same soft, stern sound. That snap that she'd give me to correct my mistake. Young ladies do not wipe their nose on their sleeves, she'd say. I hiccuped and huddled into the corner of the jungle gym, remembering her face in my memory. She would always have a frown when she'd scold me for something, but that's not what I loved to remember about her. I loved to remember how she looked at me when I was playing, how she'd smiled so wide when I'd shown her I could use Mabiab, or magic, as Daddy called it. She would just tell me how proud she was and all that I'd be able to do with it. You will do great things, Soyeon, she declared. It is a wonderful gift. I have it too. I will teach you how to use it, she told me. But there was always one rule. Never show it to your daddy. I asked her why, but she just told me to keep it a secret. I promised her to never use it in front of him. I tried to keep it a secret, but a few months ago I messed up and accidentally used a spell in front of him. I shut my eyes and shook my head, biting my lip. I didn't want to remember that. I didn't want to think about how angry Daddy had been, how he and Mommy had been arguing about it. They'd shouted so long about some sort of promise they'd made, something about danger coming now. I didn't pay attention to it. I was too scared of Daddy. I wish I had paid attention, because then I wouldn't be here in the cold, hugging Mr. Blackie, scared and alone. So very alone. Hey, it's the weirdo! I winced at the sound of the name and turned my gaze upon the sight of 3 of the usual mean boys on the playground. I didn't know 2 of their names, but one of them was tall, tan, and dark-haired. He talked with a funny accent, and he always wore the same white football shirt with the blue 24 on it. His name was Diego. Why you all alone, weirdo? Ne periodo, I hissed darkly in my own language. He laughed, and the others did too. See, she really is weird. She won't even talk English. Just go away, I snapped. I then laughed. They laughed again. Why do they laugh at everything I say? When I speak my own language, they laugh. When I speak theirs, they laugh again. They're always laughing, and nothing's funny. Their laugh is cold and disgusting. Make us, Diego laughed. I glared up at him and hugged Mr. Blackie closely. I could do it. I could make them leave me alone. But Mommy always said it was wrong. I asked her why, but she always just said, people will not understand. Is that why Daddy didn't like it? Was that why he shouted? When Daddy had found out about it, he was really angry. He kept telling Mommy that it was dangerous, that I'd be found, that someone might come to our house. I didn't understand it, but I did understand Daddy's shouting and Mommy's tears. They were both afraid. Mommy kept trying to explain things to Daddy, and any time I came into the room, they would tell me to go to bed or go somewhere else. I would never listen to what they said. A few nights afterwards, Daddy stormed out of the house for a long time, and I didn't see him again for a while. Mommy was really sad, too. Was it because I was a witch? Was it because I could use Mabio? Did these boys hate me because of that? Was it just natural for witches to be hated? Just please go away, I finally squeaked out, getting up to walk away. We said make us, Diego laughed, following after me, making me want to cry even more. Why do you always sit out here alone? Where's your mom and dad? They laughed again, but I began to shake. I don't know. 3 weeks after Daddy had left, men came to our house. Mommy called them dawn bringers. I didn't know what that meant, but she said they were bad people who wanted to hurt me. She told me to run away and run fast. She would be right behind me. I did as she told me, and I ran. I didn't even have time to pack a bag. All I could do was grab Mr. Blackie and run out the door with Mommy helping me go. But as I made it out of the house, I heard the door slam beyond me. Mommy wasn't there. She'd gone back inside. Run away, Soyeon, she said. I love you so much. I ran. I ran and ran as fast as I could. I heard screaming and shouting, and then I looked back. There was fire leaping from the windows of my house. I cried for Mommy.
Be quiet.
I looked up to see Daddy there. There were tears in his eyes as he picked me up and ran.
We need to go. We need to go right now.
Daddy, where have you been? Where'd you go?
I don't have time to explain. They're coming for you, and it's my fault. I didn't mean for any of this.
He whimpered more like a frightened dog more than he did my daddy.
You have to get away, honey. They're looking for you too.
Where? I asked. Where are we going to hide? Where's Mommy?
Mommy's not coming. And Daddy can't come either, he whispered. Remember what country Daddy comes from? He asked.
America.
Remember how we all talked about going there this month on vacation?
He tossed me a small backpack. I opened it to see a bunch of papers and a small black book with my face in it. He called it a passport. He shoved me into the car, and as I buckled up, I kept shooting glances back at the burning home. Tears rolling down my face in small streams. Daddy, where's Mommy?
She's gone, he sobbed. You've got to go to America. You've got to get away.
But Mommy will come with us. She has to, I cried, tugging his sleeve.
He shook his head. I can't come either, darling. I have to lead them away from you. Get them off your tail. He sobbed harder than ever, his hands shaking as he drove quickly into town. I love you, sweetheart. And God, please forgive me, he cried. He cried the whole drive to the airport.
I kept trying to make him come with me, begging him to come, pleading with him to find Mommy. But I knew he wouldn't. The only words he gave me were the same ones Mommy gave me. I love you so much. When I got on the plane, I looked out the window to try and find him, but saw nothing but darkness. I would be in America the very next day, alone and terrified. Well, Diego asked, pulling me back from my memories. Where's your mom and dad? He laughed. I turned to run away, but he grabbed my wrist and yanked me around to face him. I didn't want him or his friends to see my face. I was biting my lower lip, trying to hold back the unyielding tears that dripped down my eyes and smeared my glasses. I shivered and tried to pull away. Oh, what a crybaby, they laughed and carried on like a pack of birds, cawing all the time. Leave me alone, I shrieked, making my hand away. Or what? Diego snapped, throwing me away. You gonna cry about it? I'd had enough. I snarled and readjusted my glasses. I shoved him hard and he stumbled backwards. Don't talk about my mommy or daddy again, I screamed. He got up and he shoved me. I squealed and tripped, falling over. Mr. Blackie fell by my side and one of his friends picked him up. Hey! Look, she plays with stuffed toys, he guffawed. Get him back! Make us, Diego challenged. The words my mommy had seemed so far away now. I didn't care if these boys were a bit older than I was. I was 9 years old. I had feelings. I had so much pain, so much anger, and these three were pushing me too far. I felt that small piece of restraint snap in my mind. I held out my hand and pointed at Diego's pants. Halag! I screamed. I reached out with the power of Magiog and watched as his pants instantly unzipped and dropped down to his ankles, exposing his rocket ship underwear to his friends. Hey, what did you do? His buddies all stared in shock at what had just happened, dropping Mr. Blackie. But I wasn't done yet. They'd pushed me too far today, and now I was going to finish what I started. I pulled back my hand as if holding a baseball and reached out into the Magiog. I inhaled softly, focusing on the power I was to wield, and finally thrust my hand forward as if pushing an invisible wall. Dionjita! I snapped. The invisible force I commanded threw the three boys backwards with tremendous force. It was a simple spell that commanded them to be thrown backwards as far as I wanted. I sent them soaring away and into the swings behind them. I scooped up Mr. Blackie and ran away, tears falling behind me. I laughed at what I'd done, laughed at my victory, laughed at things finally going my way. I'd shown them. I'd taught them a lesson. I hid away in the girls' bathroom's house near the playground and sat down in the toilet, my laughter fading and turning to sobs. I cried, hugging Mr. Blackie close. I had won only a small victory, but what I wanted wasn't victory over bullies. I wanted Mommy and Daddy back. I wanted to go home. I wanted to go back to my family. I was alone, scared, so sad. All because I was a witch. All because I didn't have any friends. I sobbed in solitude. And that was Monster Club Chapter 38. And I will go ahead and pull up Shogun of Crime.
All right. We left off on Shogun of Crime, Chapter 15. Before we read this, I'm going to give y'all a quick warning about these next few chapters. As I've said before, the story of Shogun of Crime is the retelling of the conquest of Oda Nobunaga, which means that many of the events and characters in the story reflect different events and characters in real history. This is the portion of Oda Nobunaga's history where he's dealing with a group of religious monks known as the Iko-Iki, a group of Buddhist militant monks who became a very big thorn in Oda Nobunaga's side. Since I couldn't do Buddhist monks here and make it make sense, I decided to go with a parallel and use Islamic extremists. Some people will find this offensive, but I think this is the closest parallel we can get to a modern day version of what Oda Nobunaga was dealing with. So, with that disclaimer out of the way, let us begin. Shogun of Crime, Chapter 15. The youth center was called the Faithful Haven Youth Center. It looked very close to what Oichi had pictured it to be. It was a large and very open building nestled around a semicircle of trees. A single road led off the highway and into the parking lot, with trees acting like a natural barrier to hide it from prying eyes. Oichi found this amusing, considering that this place might be hiding. The parking lot itself was sparse, with only about 5 or 6 cars there right now. Oichi and Marcus stepped out of the car and walked towards the entrance of the facility, and Marcus looked around, noticing 2 tan men wearing what looked like police uniforms, and they had guns on their hips.
Heads up, boss. The MCP is on to us. We should have brought more people,
Marcus said. With any luck, we won't need them, she replied. They walked past the MCP and into the building. The main lobby was clean and looked very inviting. There were a pair of double doors which led back to what appeared to be a basketball court, and another door to the right which had an older man with a thick gray beard standing outside of it. He was professionally dressed, and his balding head had scraggly hair on top. He had a cold look to his eyes, a calculating stare. As he looked over at Oichi, she could tell he was sizing her up, taking her in. She returned his gaze, and she smirked, recognizing a twinge of discomfort come from him. She wasn't one to be easily intimidated. Good afternoon, Oichi smiled politely. Are you Mr. Habaza?
Yes, it's nice to meet you, Miss Tiger.
He gave a respectful bow of the head and held out his hand, which Oichi took firmly.
To what do I owe this visit? Your friends didn't explain very well.
This won't take long. Do you have someplace private we can talk? Oichi asked.
Mr. Habaza gave another curt nod and opened the door he was standing in front of. Inside were 2 cushioned chairs, a large mahogany desk, and a swivel chair behind it. There was a tall bookstand behind the desk filled with books, statues, and trinkets. An Arabic dagger sat on the desk as well, sheathed. Habaza walked around to sit behind his desk and closed a book he had out, putting away his laptop. Oichi took a seat across from him, and Marcus started to join her.
Marcus, kindly wait outside, Oichi urged.
But ma'am,
I'll be fine, Marcus. Kindly wait for me, she instructed forcefully.
Marcus gave a disapproving glare but nodded, walking out. When the door was closed, she leaned back and crossed a leg in front of Habaza, making him clearly a little disgruntled.
There's this excellent phrase I've heard since coming to America. Getting down to brass tacks, Oichi smiled. I like this phrase. It's so catchy. It reminds me of this Shakespeare phrase, that brevity is the soul of wit. Such fancy ways to not beat around the bush.
Isn't that what you're doing now? Habaza challenged.
I'm making a point, Mr. Habaza. I'm simply giving you a warning. I don't care for those who waste my time or evade a direct answer. So don't try to dodge my questions, because I have quite a few of them.
Habaza frowned and crossed his fingers over each other, resting his elbows on the desk.
Isn't it rather rude for a guest to make threats to their host?
I'm not making you a threat, Mr. Habaza. I'm simply stating the facts as they stand. And one fact I can't overlook is the amount of questionable activities happening in my territories.
Your territories? You mean the peaceful neighborhoods and apartments you forced to pay you for protection? Habaza challenged.
I don't force them to do anything. Those individuals asked me to give them protection. This was actually true. After her initial takeover and defeat of the nearby delinquent groups and street punks, many shops and apartment dwellers asked if they could be brought under the fold of the Taiga Syndicate. No extortion was forced. More to the point, for the last few months, plenty of vandalisms, assaults, and nuisances have been happening in the local communities, and plenty of the suspects have ties to this youth center.
Miss Taiga, you can't... honestly suggest we have something to do with that.
Mr. Abaza, I don't like it when people tell me what I can or can't do. Especially when it comes to speaking my mind. Oichi hissed darkly, her glare returning. But instead of shrinking back from it, Abaza leaned forward and pressed back with a fierce glare of his own. This man would not break easily.
When my uncle built this facility, he was creating a home and a job resource for dozens of struggling Muslim families who have dealt with discrimination in this community for years. To suggest we would do anything to upset the community and dishonor our reputation is nothing short of insulting, Abaza explained forcefully. Now, I'm not saying that there haven't been problems in the community lately, and I have already spoken to the police about it. The MCP is already investigating the perpetrators, and they will be dealt with in due time. Let us clean up our own messes, he sighed and leaned back. You're from Japan, yes? Surely you can respect and understand how difficult it is to thrive in a country and culture so different from your own. We have made a future for ourselves here, a future we built for ourselves. This community is strong and has no need for help from the local police. Nor do we need it from you and your gang of thugs.
Mr. Abaza, you can dispense with the preaching. We're in a youth facility, not your mosque, Oichi growled. Don't play the discrimination card on me either. I've seen this community, and I've worked with it. After I cleaned up the real punks and thugs off its streets, the people were more than willing and capable to start producing and working happily along with myself and my organization. I don't think they expect a new threat coming from their own community members, and yet here we are.
You think that members of Faithful Haven are responsible for the recent troubles? Prove it, he challenged.
The police have proof. Why don't you ask your MCP to hand the rest of it over?
We deal with our own problems, Abaza added,
and you're about to become my problem. Would you like to know how I deal with my problems?
Oichi's voice was fierce, a taste of venom on her tongue.
A lesser man might have shrunk back from her, but Abaza was just as stern. He was holding his ground with the tigress.
Why don't you tell me what it is you want from me, Miss Taiga? Abaza finally growled.
What I want is clarification. For the sake of this community and the Muslims and non-Muslims living in it, I want to know who is in your facility and who is it that is behind these events. I want them brought forward. If it isn't the Faithful Haven's fault and merely the actions of a select few, turn them over to the police and this all goes away. If it is the fault of your youth center, then this is your first and only warning. Your MCP might be enough to sway the police, but it won't sway me. I will turn your world upside down until I find the vermin that are spreading their filth on these streets. Oichi finished and leaned forward at last, waiting for Abaza to speak. It was his move, and he simply glared at her dangerously.
Miss Taiga, I'm very sorry to say this, but I can't help you, he replied. You are not law enforcement, and you are certainly not a queen or saint for whom I'm to bow to. I have cooperated with the police, and as I told you, the MCP are investigating the incidents.
So that's your answer?
Oichi asked. That's my answer, he sneered. But I suppose I should thank you, Miss Taiga. Your concern for our people in this community are very apparent. It is my sincerest hope that nothing more happens to her to disrupt your people.
Oichi's eyes widened and she felt her jaw clench at the very clear threat. You told me earlier it's rude for a guest to threaten their host. Is it perhaps more appropriate for a host to threaten their guest?
Miss Taiga, there is no threat.
Merely stating the facts as they are, Abaza smiled.
I'm sure you can find your way out.
I'd walk you out myself, but there's much I need to do here. Oichi rose from her seat and turned, walking to the door. As she touched the doorknob, she looked back at Abaza. Pretenses aside, she snarled, I will burn your world to the ground and scatter your ashes to the winds, she hissed.
And pretenses aside, Abaza hissed back, we have stood against your kind since the days of our prophet, and we do not fear the likes of you, woman.
Oichi marched out of the building with Marcus by her side. She said nothing until they got out of the parking lot and into the highway. It was one of the few times Oichi felt genuinely flustered, even unnerved.
Ma'am, what happened in there? Marcus asked.
That Abaza is twisted, she hissed. He's a wolf, and that center is a den of wolves.
You think he's behind the attacks and incidents in the community?
Marcus asked. I have no doubt that he is. And even if he's not direct, he knows the ones who are guilty, and he is protecting them. Oichi nodded. And before I left, he made a final threat. He's only getting started.
What are we going to do? We could do a little damage to a center if you like. One good dumpster fire, maybe hit their books.
No, that's the worst part, Ouichi whispered. We can't touch them. Why not? Marcus asked. Ouichi stayed silent a long moment. Marcus was bright. He'd figure it out for himself if given time. But time was not on their side. With each ticking second, the gears of fate turned onward. Abaza was likely already planning new events, new assaults, new public disturbances. Minor things, really. Things that she could and should be overlook. But now she couldn't. She couldn't ignore this. That Abaza had thrown down the gauntlet, and now she would respond. But how? We can't just deal with this as we always have. The Faithful Haven Youth Center is a key part of this community. Even if they're a nest of vipers, the people of this area see them as a safe haven, a beacon of unity. If we just go attacking and screwing with the haven,
then we lose their trust.
And we only feed more converts and delinquents to the youth center. Then we become their new target. You should have heard the way that Abaza talked. He's a classic victimhood screeching moron. He sees the world as his enemy and thus is hostile towards it.
Right, the last thing we want to do is feed that fire. That explains why the police won't touch this one.
And we're faced with the same red tape, Ouichi nodded.
We can't just ignore it either, Marcus grumbled. What do you suggest we do, ma'am?
Have some of our sellers and peddlers circulate in the streets that the youth center is associated with. Keep an eye out for anything we can use. Evidence that we can pin the criminals to the Faithful Haven. If we can't touch them directly, we'll dig up enough dirt that the police will finally have no choice but to pursue, Ouichi explained.
It's all for reserve to you, ma'am, if I may say so. I admit I was kind of hoping for some shock and awe.
There are right ways to do things and easy way to do things. Shock and awe is the easy way. And we can't afford the easy way right now, Ouichi replied. But deep in her mind, she agreed with Marcus. How she would love to go all out on the center, to just raid it and find the ones responsible for these crimes. She'd drag them out by the hair and make them beg for mercy. And Abaza would watch from the side, giving a reminder of who was in charge. But that couldn't happen. Not if she wanted to maintain her place in the community. Take us home, Marcus. I need some time to rest.
Would you like to call that Todd fellow?
Marcus asked. Not right now. Ouichi blushed, smiling. The thought of Todd bringing some weightlessness to her shoulders. But maybe later. I would love to have something to look forward to later, when things start looking up.
Oh, how she hoped things would start looking up soon. Ouichi couldn't shake this feeling that a dark and very dangerous cloud was rolling over her. A change of fate was coming. A divine wind was blowing down a new destiny, and she was terrified of where it would lead. All right, that was chapter 15. Now we've got chapter 16, and then we're done. All right, let's do it. Written April 9th, 2020. Weeks passed in disgusting and distasteful silence for Ouichi. Nothing had changed significantly, and as she sat behind her desk at home pouring over income reports, her teeth grit in anger. She'd managed to make a few recoveries after the betrayal of the late mayor candidate. A few of her former associates were now crawling back, and with the help of their allies and protected gun-running industry, they were able to keep things relatively secure. Their margins were slim, but growing. If left alone, they might even be able to start expanding again in a month or two. But there was something deeply wrong with this situation. A dark foreboding in her heart. She couldn't begin her conquest again. She couldn't keep expanding influence as things stood right now. Informants on the street kept pouring in new information about the movements of the youths coming from the youth center. Vandalism and assault cases were growing, but nothing was substantial enough to warrant a response. It was as if they were taunting her and the police themselves. A challenge to even try striking back in the name of the community, only to lose the community's trust. It was all a disgusting circumstance, and Ouichi hated it to her core. As her fingers strummed her desk, her mind was hardly on income reports and growth rates. It was on how to deal with the blasted Faithful Haven Center. Miss Taiga? Ouichi glanced up, grateful for the break in monotony to see Marcus at her door. His face carried an urgent seriousness that she hadn't seen in a while from him, which brought Ouichi to a more stiff position on her seat.
Marcus, what is it?
A letter for you, ma'am, he said quickly, hurrying over to it with an envelope.
Oichi took the letter and ripped off the seal to open it.
You seem awfully shook up over a letter.
Sorry. You seem awfully shook up over a letter, she replied. As she opened it, Marcus stayed off to the side.
It's not the letter, it's who it's from. Look at the seal.
Oichi glanced at the seal over the envelope. It was a falcon, wings outstretched, its talon clutching a hollyhock. She'd not seen such a lovely visage before since coming to New Mercia.
That's the family crest of the Iluniano, a Sicilian mafia family with deep roots in New Mercia since the 20s.
Are they wanting in on our turf, I wonder? She asked. She slid out the paper from within and read it silently, leaning forward in her chair as each sentence grabbed her further and further. A smile began to creep across her face as she looked at the message's contents. A meeting?
The Iliano family were prominent back in the day, but now they're just bootleggers and smugglers more than anything. I doubt they have much they can offer us, Marcus grumbled.
Shame.
Shame. Here I thought they were threatening us or something. It would have given us some publicity to put the Iluniano family down.
Marcus, you're forgetting something very important, Oichi smiled. The Iliano can give us something very valuable. Credit. You said yourself we get publicity by stamping them out, because the Iliano are a prominent family with roots in the city. If the Iliano want to forge an alliance with us, though, it can only make us look better.
So you're going?
It's tomorrow night. A dinner meeting. Keeps things prim and proper for me while I'm gone, please.
Any security?
2 gunmen. I don't want to appear as an invading party,
Oichi explained. It was a mansion. It practically dwarfed Oichi's mansion. It was massive. It was rustic and elaborately beautiful. For Oichi, who had grown up around the eastern beauty of Japanese gardens and aesthetic, this was a beautiful example of early American architecture that appealed to her inner artist. The vines that snaked their way along the border walls and the inner fountain that led up to the mansion were inviting and incredibly showy of the value and power of the family. This was the Iliano estate. Oichi was hardly able to contain her excitement as she got out of the car and walked to the gate. She was dressed in a classy dress with a coat over it and pearl necklace. As she got to the gate, 2 other young men carrying sidearms walked out beside her, both dressed in business casual attire. They would not sit in for the meal, but they would be decent security. There was an older man at the gate who looked like he was nearly in his 80s. He couldn't be the head of the family. No, the way he gave polite bows and opened the gate made it seem like he was a servant or underling. Oichi smiled and waved at him as she walked inside.
My name is Hector Iliano. I'm Uncle Horatio Iliano, the head of the family.
The uncle is meant to come and greet the guests, Oichi asked.
It is not a mark of disrespect, I assure you. My nephew would have come to meet you himself, but he's currently on the phone and couldn't come to meet you, he explained.
Oichi followed Hector to the large double doors leading into the manor.
I'm told that you love spaghetti.
How could you possibly know that?
A very reliable source. Unfortunately, for dinner this evening, we are to have a traditional salmon dish, which is a staple of the Iliano family. That said, we are more than happy to make something else if you'd rather.
No, that's all right. Oichi felt herself stiffen a little. How did these people know her favorite meal? And why were they making such high-class meals for her when they barely knew her? Things weren't adding up. Oichi quickly started building up her defenses. She walked to the dining room and was enamored by the massive dining table set with the plates of fine china in shivering silverware. 4 tall windows lined the long wall beside, and the table letting in the fading sun. The chandelier above the table was glittering with crystal and real candles burning away at the top. Sitting at the far end of the table was a man easily in his 60s. He had black hair, balding near the top, and a thick mustache. There was a familiar look about him that Oichi couldn't quite place. He glanced up and smiled. It was not threatening. It wasn't even challenging. Oichi had become used to confronting opposing gang leaders with false modesty, hostility, or threats. But here, he was genuinely open to her. He stood up and gave a polite bow.
Miss Tiger, it's a pleasure to have you in my home. Thank you so much for coming, and I apologize for the abruptness of this meeting, but I'm afraid I couldn't wait.
Wait for what? Oichi asked, reaching out her hand to shake his. Horatio shook his head at the hand, and then walked forward and hugged Oichi in a tight embrace. Oichi let out a cry of surprise, and the 2 gunmen behind her pulled their pistols fast.
Whoa, I meant no offense. Horatio laughed, stepping back. Please, take a seat. I'd simply waited so anxiously to finally meet you.
You always hug your business associates? Oichi asked, taken aback, and finally taking a seat at the other end of the table.
Business associates? Miss Tiger, by the time we're done, you and I will be practically family.
He looked to his watch and frowned.
Where is he?
He?
I was expecting him to be here. I called him and he said he was coming.
Horatio fumbled about as he searched for his cell phone.
A god-cursed contraption. I miss when we just used simple house phones. Always knew where they were, and...
Mr. Illuiano, Oichi interrupted, I should go ahead and make this clear. This is not how I usually conduct business. If you want to forge a business arrangement or alliance, let's start the discussion before eating so we can think over the details.
Think over it. Oichi, my dear, there will be plenty of time to sort out those things much later. For now, we need to discuss far more important things. There's a certain order to these things, you know. Will you want to invite your family here?
My family? What on earth are you...
Well, obviously, they'd want to be present for the ceremony, I think. And I'd be happy to pay for the plane tickets. It wouldn't be too much of a...
I've had enough, Oichi snapped, now rising to her feet, her eyes flashing. Are you demented? She demanded. What are you talking about? Fly my family here? What do you want?
I'm sorry, did I say something wrong, Miss Taiga?
What you're saying doesn't make any sense. I don't understand what you're...
Sorry I'm late, Dad. The voice froze Oichi's blood cold. Through the doors to the dining room walked the one man she didn't want to see. The one man who couldn't see her making business deals with mafia bosses. He was wearing a white button-down shirt and black pleated pants with the nice shoes on, and he looked a little out of breath from rushing. His eyes had caught hers, and Todd was now staring at Oichi with complete confusion.
Oichi? He asked. Todd? She gasped.
Todd turned his eyes to Horatio in shock. Dad, what's going on here?
Dad?
Oichi squealed, nearly sinking back in her chair in horror. Horatio nodded and beamed brightly, standing and walking to his apparent son. Todd clapped him on the back. I was worried for a while, I admit, he chuckled. Todd never appreciated the family business. Had too much of the law in his blood, I guess, though I'll never know where he got it from. Went to the academy, changed his name, the whole 9 yards, so when he calls me up saying he's dating the infamous Oichi Taiga, you can imagine just how happy that made me as a father. Finally coming around to your roots, eh, lad? So I figured we could all sit down and talk about our future as... Oichi Taiga? You? Oichi, you're... Todd's eyes were now sinking into a dark place. A place that Oichi's heart couldn't reach now. Todd, you're head of the Tiger Syndicate, aren't you? He asked. Horatio looked confused a moment and crossed his arms. Well, don't joke around, boy. Surely you knew when you started dating her who she was. As Todd's face twisted from surprise to horror, it slowly became rage. Horatio caught this and his own face sank in defeat. I assumed you knew. I just lost my appetite, Todd snarled, storming out of the room. Todd! Oichi cried, chasing after him. Horatio didn't bother to stop her as she ran out after Todd. The two gunmen by the door saw the two running and were too confused to know whether to pursue them or not. So they went back to standing at attention, not bothering to interfere. Todd, please talk to me, Oichi cried, grabbing his sleeve. Todd swung his arm free. Talk to you? Who the hell are you? He snapped. Are you the same girl I met on that street? Or are you some bloodthirsty Yakuza bitch? She could take that insult from any man, but not Todd. Todd, it's not like I'm one or the other. I'm still the same woman. You lied to me. You've lied to me from day one. Todd screamed. I'm such an idiot. I'm such a goddamn idiot. How could I have not seen it? I didn't know you were with the Iliano family. You can't choose your family. Todd sneered. I never wanted anything to do with Dad's business. I left for the police academy when I was old enough, changed my name and turned my life around. I didn't want any part of this life. I still love my dad. I mean, of course I told him about you and that I was in love with you, and so I guess he thought I'd finally come back around to this bullshit. And you dragged me back. You used me. You fucking toyed with me. I would never do that to you, Todd, Oichi pleaded, grabbing his hand and holding it to her chest so that he could feel her heart pounding. I never meant to toy with you. I never meant for this. But you lied to me. You were running a criminal empire and you just used the poor dumb cop. Of course you did. Of course you used me. Must have been easy for you to get inside details on the cop's movements from me. Is that what it was about? Is that why you played with me? No, Oichi screamed. Of course not. She didn't have the heart to tell him that she had indeed, on occasion, taken advantage of his position from time to time, but the truth was still more than that. When I was with you, Todd, I felt like I was a woman, not a tigress, a woman. Please believe me. I love you, Todd. Don't say that to me. Don't you dare say that to me. Not now. Not after this. He pulled his hand away from her, and Oichi could see tears beginning to form in his eyes. Tears of pain and humiliation. He felt used, betrayed, and Oichi couldn't blame him. I should arrest you. I should turn you in now and break apart your whole world, Todd hissed. I should slap a pair of cuffs on you and be done with this whole game of yours. Oichi stood stock still a moment, and the Yakuza side of her,
The tigress side wanted to strike him down, yank the pistol from her waist and shoot him before he could take her in. But another side of her was in charge now. The woman's side of her was holding out her hands to him, waiting for the cuffs. If that's what you want, Todd, please, turn me in. I won't fight back. Todd stared at her, bit his lip, tears racing down his face as he slapped her hand away. Don't look at me like that! You're not the girl I knew! God damn it, why'd you have to be the tigress? Why'd it have to be you? He stood there shaking with shame and in pain. He choked through sobs and finally managed to speak. I just have to know one thing. Was it real? Was any of what we had actually real? Oichi was choking on her own tears, fighting back her fear and the slowly creeping isolation slipping into her heart. I know you won't believe me, but I swear to you on my life and my family, I loved you from the moment I met you, she finally confessed. I hope you never learn this truth about me, and I was naive to think you never would. It's not because I thought you were stupid, it's because I thought I was too clever. It's all my fault. This is my fault, Todd. Mine. That may be the first thing I truly believe, Todd sobbed. This is your fault, Oichi Taiga. Tigress of Major City. Todd turned on his heels and stormed to the doors. As he grabbed the door handle, he paused and looked back at her through red, puffy eyes, full of remorseful tears. I can't turn you in. I can't because even if all you did was use me, I loved you. What I had for you was real. So I can't arrest you, but we're done. Oichi Taiga, you better never let me see your face again. Never! The slamming of the door shattered Oichi's heart like glass. She fell to her knees there in the front hall of the mansion, bawling into her hands. The woman had died, and the tigress remained. But even now, that tigress was in mourning. From the other room, sitting at his dining table, Horatio Iluliano was tearing up as well as he lifted his wine glass to his lips, lamenting the terrible mistake he'd made. How horrible it was to lose a son's trust and a future daughter in a single moment. All right, well, that was chapter 16. All right, well, we can stop there for tonight if you'd like, or I can read the next chapter. It's y'all's call. I'm going to take a drink. Got one vote for the next chapter. There's a couple of people saying they need a minute. Okay. We got a couple people saying to keep it in suspense. I'll tell you what. As before, I'll put it to a quick vote. All right, here's the poll. I'll give you a moment to vote while I cool off a minute. Yeah, Shogun of Crime is probably one of my favorite stories I've ever written. It's up there with Tempest Blade and Upon the Stars. I think those are three of my favorite stories. All right, one more drink. Okay, let's see the result. In poll.
Wow, that is a close one. Looks like it was won by a single vote. All right. Looks like you get one more. Let me check something first before I do. Okay. All right. Y'all ready? Shogun of Crime, Chapter 17, April 30th, 2020. 3 weeks since the splitting of Oichi and Todd have done nothing to heal the pain in Oichi's heart. She spent most of her time in her manor, laying in bed or walking about in a near stupor. It was as if all the life, energy, and fire had left her. She was angry, furious at herself for letting her emotions become so easily compromised and allowing herself to be taken in by matters of romance when they had nothing to do with her plans. Yet she was also beyond disappointed in her failure to prepare for this. She should have told him. She should have come up with some excuse or a lie. But even the thought of lying to Todd further, especially when the truth was so obvious, was near inconceivable. She couldn't bring herself to do it, or even consider it. There were moments she felt the urge to pick up her phone and call him, apologize to him, reach out once more to the one she'd given her life and time to, but she never did, and she felt fearful that she never would. As she sat alone that afternoon in her kitchen, having cooked a delicious dinner for herself, she picked at her food like a child who didn't want to eat her broccoli. There was no feeling in it. Cooking was one of the many things she enjoyed doing. It cheered her up when she was down and made her feel in control, but now it felt like lacked allure or luster. Even looking at the fruits of her labors felt a little unsavory. Her cell phone sat beside her under the false delusion that it would ring with Todd's name on it, him expressing how much he missed her and loved her, how they would run away together and forget this ever happened. But these childlike fantasies were nothing but that. Fantasies. Still, there it sat, waiting for the call that she knew would probably never come. Her syndicate family continued to run itself like a well-oiled machine. And every few hours, she'd get a call from Marcus or one of her other lieutenants wanting to check in on her or ask her advice for something. She'd mostly regained her losses after the betrayal weeks ago, and yet these things could not fill the pain in her chest and in her mind. Suddenly, she heard the ringing of her phone. She didn't even wait for the second ring. Like an instinct, she snatched up her phone instantly to check the caller ID, praying, hoping that it was Todd. But no, it was only Marcus. Clicking the answer button, she put the phone on speaker. "I'm fine, Marcus," she lied, already guessing what he was calling about. "Ma'am, we have a situation down here. It's critical," Marcus hissed through the receiver. Surprised by his whisper, Oichi turned her glance to the phone. "A situation? What's going on?" "It's better that you come and see for yourself. How soon can you get to the Setting Sun convenience store? It's on the corner." "I know where it is, Marcus," Oichi replied sharply, her depression starting to inch away as she knew the street that store was on. It wasn't far from the red zone area where she'd been monitoring the youth center. "Was it vandalized?" "Worse. There's been a murder, ma'am," Marcus replied. "You need to come down here. Now." Oichi didn't wait any longer. She didn't even put her food in the fridge before grabbing her coat and walking quickly out the door to her car. Possibilities and mental images of the scene were already dancing in her head. She knew that the possibility of what those bastards were capable of and what they'd likely been willing to do get their point across. Worse yet, the Setting Sun store was a pretty well-liked small business that had been rather hospitable and even kind to any of the syndicate enforcers that dropped by. Was that why they were hit? Had they been targeted for their kindness to Oichi and her organization? She had to know, and when she did, there was no telling what next steps to take. 30 minutes of driving and Oichi finally came to the scene of the murder. There were police lines set up around the store, but no cop cars anywhere to be seen. In fact, there wasn't even much of a crowd, just people walking around and whispering to each other. Oichi marched to the police station where Marcus was waiting. He was on his phone when she arrived, but seeing her got him to put it away quickly. "Good, you made it."
"The police have the body?"
"Yeah, but one of our boys was in the store when it happened and managed to get a few pictures on his phone."
"What was his name?"
"Zachary. Good kid."
"Show me what he got. If it's any good, I'll make it worth his while for getting this evidence."
Marcus handed over his phone to Oichi could see it. "Don't really matter that much, does it?" Marcus asked. "The police are still going to handle this with kid gloves, no matter what evidence we bring."
They didn't want to upset the community. "The community is already pretty damn upset, Marcus," Oichi replied, looking at the images. As ghastly as Oichi expected them to be, she was relieved that it wasn't as gruesome as she'd expected. Though it was not a pretty series of pictures. From what she gathered, there were at least 2 males with faces covered. One had a handgun and a backpack. The other had a baseball bat in his hand. One of the pictures showed the baseball bat being taken to a glass case of the candy and another to the cash register. They weren't worried about money. The body of the pictures was a 48-year-old woman who worked the shop with her husband. She had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. The pictures ended there.
After he got these pics, the killers chased everyone out of the store, Marcus explained.
The 2 men have masks on. How can we know that they're from the youth center?
If you scroll to the 3rd picture, one of them takes off his mask and you can see his face. He's a regular visitor to the youth center, Marcus explained. Flipping the picture back to show Oichi, who glared at the boy's black-haired visage and his cold brown eyes, he was laughing heartily, as if listening to a funny joke. You could have texted me these. Why drag me here? Oichi asked. Because of what the pictures didn't show. Marcus stepped under the tape and motioned for Oichi to follow him. She did so, and tailed Marcus into the store to see the inside. There was the spot where the woman's body had been, but there was more to it. The room was spray-painted red with long streaks, and there was writing on the wall. Some vague threats and random profanity. A few were Quran verses, but what drew Oichi's eyes the most was on the ground above where the body lay, painted in the same red paint. Written words. Traitors will pay in blood. This was personal, wasn't it, Marcus? Oichi hissed. They likely hit this door because they did business with us. They made an example out of them, and now it'll be harder to maintain a presence here, Marcus replied. The 2 who owned the shop were Mr. and Mrs. Talib. They were both good people. Boss? Boss. Marcus looked at Oichi, and his heart stopped beating. Something was burning in her eyes. A determination. Madness. He'd never seen it before. She looked positively bloodthirsty, and her teeth were grit in a ferocious rage. Her eyes flashed with hellfire, and her eyes turned to Marcus, who inched away a few paces. Get me a team of 20 guns, she snapped. Boss, we can't start a firefight in the middle of town. We'll lose the trust of the people entirely and put people in... I didn't ask for your opinion, Marcus. I said get me 20 of our boys who can carry guns and who don't ask questions when I say things. Have them meet tonight at our safe house in town and tell them to leave their morals at home. She turned and stormed out of the convenience store, a rage etching its way into her face. Boss, what are you going to do? I'm going to keep my promise to that bastard, Oichi growled. I'm going to burn his world to the ground and scatter his ashes to the wind. The night was cold, and the faithful Haven Youth Center was alive and bustling with lights on almost all the windows. 5 large vans drove up to the parking lot, and out of them jumped 20 men, all wearing 3-piece suits and black ties. As they walked out, one pulled out a silenced pistol and aimed up at the nearby street lamps, taking a careful shot at each one to deaden the lights. While he worked, the others got to their own tasks. Out of the back of the vans, they pulled large red tankards and carried them to the sides of the building, while others pulled out cases of bourbon and alcohol bottles, stuffing the top with rags and swishing around the fluids to soak the cloth. Oichi climbed out of her own car that had pulled in behind them, and Marcus walked behind her, frightened as not once had Oichi changed her expression from cold, calculated hatred. Surround the building, she said, and douse the doors and windows, she ordered. Her crew ran to their stations, pouring smelly diesel fuel around the windows and doors to the center. Once they'd finished, they retreated to a safe distance while the other 11 or 12 men started lighting the newly made cocktails in their hands. Oichi stood in the center of this mob of men and looked at the youth center as one glares at a large cockroach. Miss Taiga, please, I beg you to think about what you're about to do, Marcus pleaded. Our information tells us that even though the youth center is closed at this hour, several young men with past offenses seem to congregate here at this time, correct? Yes, but... So it's safe to assume that they're planning their next moves now, yes? Oichi barked. That's a possibility, but Miss Taiga... Then I'm settling this now, Marcus. Miss Taiga, this is going too far, Marcus pleaded. A woman is dead, Marcus. She died doing business with us. But you'll... Marcus, if you don't have the stomach for this, go home. But I'm going to remind this city who I am. I will purge this rat's nest. And what will you do when the community becomes terrified of you? Marcus asked. That's their choice to make, Oichi replied. And now I've made mine, she snarled. She looked at the men standing around. Light it. They chucked the cocktails with an accurate hurl at the windows and doors of the building. The diesel fuel caught light almost instantly, and the walls were soon engulfed in fire. A few others ignited new cocktails and began throwing them in as well, while others went back to the van and picked up their last surprise package. Several were handed AK weaponry and were loading up the magazine, standing in a firing line beyond the inferno that was once a youth center. The screams came next. Shouts and cries of panic as the few residents inside started to realize what was happening. Several attempted to run for the windows but were met by fire. A few dared to race out the door and dash to the flames, only to be stopped in their tracks by heavy machine gun fire. And standing in the middle of the firing line was Oichi, glaring daggers at the corpses as they began to mount. Fire danced in her eyes as the evening wind kicked up, fanning the fire that climbed ever higher and the hair that blew with Oichi, making her look like a demon amongst the flames. Her eyes flashed with vengeful rage and even a grim satisfaction as for once, things were turning her way. "Stop! Please stop!" Out of the door, screaming with severe burns on his face and hands, was the wild-eyed and panic-stricken Habaza. He saw Oichi and her firing squad ahead of him and staggered out to them, yammering wildly and barely coherent. "Miss Taiga, I'm sorry. Forgive us. We were wrong to kill her. We were wrong. We'll stop. I swear we'll stop. Just please." A single gunshot silenced Habaza's pleas and cries. As he stopped, a single bullet wound through his forehead. Oichi had pulled her pistol the moment she saw him. She had no time for words with him. No interest in discussing the matter or gloating over the fallen shit stain at her feet. No. Only retribution and rage filled her heart. She lowered her gun again and then gazed at the fire. "I'm a woman of my word," she finally hissed, walking away towards the car. "Clean up the rest, boys. Anyone comes out, mow them down. See that the fire doesn't spread past the building. Then go home." Her men all nodded their agreement and got about their jobs to control the fire. As she walked to her car, Marcus stood there, fuming, looking positively horror-stricken by her savagery. "Have a good evening," she said calmly to him, not meeting his gaze. "I won't sleep a wink, and you know that," he snapped. "I'll be going out of town for a few days until all this blows over," Oichi sighed. "I think some time with my thoughts would be good for me. You can handle the day-to-day affairs on your own." "Ma'am, this is mass murder. This is wrong, and you know it. How could you do this?" Marcus blasted, finally losing his composure. Oichi paused and glanced back at him. "Is this your resignation from the family?" she asked. "Well, no," Marcus corrected. "No, I still respect you and everything you're trying to do, but it's just that—" "Pity," she answered darkly, moving past into her car. "You're a good man, Marcus. You should get out of this life while you still can, before it turns you into something like me. But as for me, it's far too late for that. I'm a demon, Marcus, and if that's what it takes to save this shitty town, then that's what I'll be." Without another word from either of them, the tigress, or perhaps the demon of New Mercia, drove off into the night, beyond the warm and haunting light of a fire that it had started. With the fire growing even higher and more fierce, the city was given an ironically cold reminder of who ran the underworld of New Mercia, and just what she was capable of when crossed. And that was chapter 17. Now, before anyone thinks that was really harsh, once again, I remind you that all of this is in keeping with the historical accuracy of what Oda Nobunaga did. In 1571, Oda Nobunaga was on the back foot. He had been in an 11-year-long siege against the Iko-Iki warrior monks of Ishiyama Honganji, and just as things were becoming more difficult, his enemies, the Azai and Asakura, returned to cause him trouble. So, being furious with these developments, he finally made a truce with the Azai and Asakura and turned his attention to the monks of Mount Hiei. With a great deal of anger and frustration, Oda surrounded the bottom of the mountain and lit it ablaze. The fire roared up the mountain to the monastery at the top, and when the monks and civilians living there attempted to flee down the mountain, Oda Nobunaga gave the order to slaughter anyone who tried to flee. It was this act that earned Oda Nobunaga the Demon King of Japan moniker. So, now you know. I wanted this scene to really reflect history. This is probably the most savage that Oichi has gotten yet. Still no closure on the Todd situation, though. But you could argue that the whole Todd situation pushed her a little over the edge. Hello, Raven, are you writing this book? Yes, this is my book. I am writing it. All right, well, that's going to be it for me tonight. I'm pretty tired and got to be ready for another long day of work tomorrow. I work the evening shift tomorrow, so there will be no stream for me tomorrow night unless by some miracle I get off at 8:30, which I doubt. And even then, I have work Wednesday morning, so I doubt that anything will happen. But anyway, that's about it. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. It was a lot of fun. I enjoy doing these readings. We'll have to do more next time. And as always, guys, I will see you in my next video. Take care.